right, I'd like to call to order the first meeting of the Regional School Committee in 2015. Happy New Year, everybody.
You too.
Welcome. All right, I'm sure most of the community is here to discuss the finances, but if anyone has any points to raise, feel free to. Otherwise, we'll move right along and we'll start up with the middle school. Hello, Mr. Shu. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. So first, I guess we'll start off with the artwork displayed right there. This month's artwork features paintings from Mrs. Simino's 6th graders. Students first studied the ancient art of Sumi Asian brush painting and then used the traditional characteristics of nature, repeated patterns, and subtle colors to create their own personal modern-day masterpieces. So you can see there.
Excellent.
So some middle school happenings that are going on right now. So Monday, January 5th, the school reopened, and Wednesday, January 7th, we will have the middle school winter band concert, and on the Thursday, January 8th, the 8th grade parent night with the high school, and on Thursday, January 15th, the middle school choral festival. Friday, January 16th, the middle school MLK Day celebration, and on Friday, January 30th, the Term 2 report cards will be posted on the Aspen portal. And some student recognition. Congratulations to Patrick Foster, who is the school-wide winner of the DSMS Geography Bee on December 23rd, the day before we left for break. The runner-up was Siddharth Kumar, and all the students in the school participated in a class all-rounds, like a spelling bee, but except geography, the week before Thanksgiving, and then the final was the day before we left. The finalists for the whole school-wide contest were Baird Garage, Jack Worcester, Noah Garani. Those were from 6th grade, and in 7th grade they were Varun Jayeti, Joseph Collins, Cooper Evans, and from 8th grade they were Aaron Marsh, Evan Lipsky, Siddharth Kumar, and Patrick Foster. They had runoffs for the class-wide, so these were the people who won their class, and then after the class-wide ones, they went to the grade-wide, and then they won their grade, and then they selected 10 students to go to the school-wide one, and Patrick Foster will be competing in the statewide one to hopefully make it to the national level. And then another thing that's going on is that the middle school recognizes John Sven, Talia Baker Marshall, Natalie Ahn, Julia DeLuca, and Rose Giglio for being published in the most recent issue of the Hutch magazine for their writing and art projects. So that's what's going on in middle school.
And Annie was a huge success.
Yes, and Annie.
Big success. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Kelly.
Yes, I
Can't add anything after that. Right?
I want to follow up on Annie. We had the pleasure opening night of having the Mudge family join us for the very nice. Mr. Davis did a nice little talk about the family and all they've done to support the arts and the auditorium. So that was very nice. I'd also like to thank and recognize both police chiefs. Chief McGowan for his support with the DARE program and allowing Officer Grabert to come in and present in classrooms and also to our 7th grade. And Chief Thompson, who has freed up Detective Godino to come in and do some leadership seminars for our students. It's been very nice, and we greatly appreciate their support. The week before vacation we participated in the Global Code Hour of Code, and we had the pleasure of having State Representative Denise Garlick, Kelly Powers from MassCan, and also a parent, Sushil Kumar, came in and presented to our students in Ms. Marco's technology classes. And her students produced 20,197 lines of code over the course of that week. So it was nice event. She did a very nice job organizing. There are 2 important dates in February that you might want to make note of. One is Sunday, February 8th, the music department will host the chocolate cafe.
Oh, yeah.
And that, I don't like chocolate. I
Are you
don't eat it.
American?
But it is amazing to see what comes in to that. It's just incredible, the chocolate, and it's topped off with some outstanding performances by all our musical groups. And then on February 12th, Mrs. Marco has organized another internet safety evening. Sergeant Mick from the Dover Police and his friends from Metlick will be here to present on internet safety. That'll be in my auditorium, and we are going, assuming that the officers are okay with it being filmed, we're going to film it and have it on public TV and have either YouTube or Vimeo clip available for parents as well, for those who can't make it. And that is what we have going on here.
Right? Sounds good. All right, on to the high school. Oh, sorry,
I
yeah,
have a
please.
super quick question. And I meant to email this earlier because a couple of meetings ago, I know I had raised a question about the DC trip on the basis of a parent asking me, and the parent followed up with me. And so I just wanted to follow up with you if you had any information about the costs.
Yes,
of the
we had
DC
sent
trip.
that out in an email blast, a breakdown of the costs. If they have,
Okay.
it was,
Okay. Do you mind? Does anyone know if could I just grab a copy of that just so I can forward it on to them to make sure they
sure,
got it?
I will
That'd be great.
get that to you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And I have another question, David. Scott, you mentioned on the back, I think it was it in the school council minutes, discussion of out-of-school students coming to dances.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Just what is the status of that? And
For the high school dances, those are run through the high schools,
Right,
so
right.
they
No, I-
can. Anything that is, we run through the middle school, we have a permission slip that we had gotten from the high school that they used for theirs. And we met with Positive, and Positive agreed that we don't see a problem with having students
so
come.
now.
Yes, they'll have to do it 48 hours in advance, so they'll have to have the form signed, and there's a sign-off from the school that they attend,
Right.
and the parent, the student who will be hosting them, and the parent of the student hosting them, just so they know that this is happening.
Okay, and then that's shared with the people who are at the door.
Correct. Yes, they will have the names of the students.
Oh, that's great. So it allows kids
Yes.
from a safe community to
Yep.
connect to their
Yeah, I think that's
Yep.
great.
That's good.
Excellent. Any other questions? All right. On to the high school. Thank you, Jeff. Catherine.
Okay, so we all came back from winter break this week, and so everyone got to catch up on their sleep and celebrate the holidays. But when we get back, which is now, we have the end of term 2 coming up really soon, and with that comes mid-years, so that's really fun. And yeah, so I think most students are starting to prepare for that this weekend and next weekend, and the long weekend is really the cramping time for that. And we also got our PSAT scores back for the sophomores and the juniors, so that's interesting. And a lot of people are actually going to take the SAT in later January. So, and also during December we had a toy drive. Student Council hosted the toy drive, which is where you kind of pick a toy to get for a child who asks for it as their Christmas present. And so we had a lot of toys come in, and this year we tried a new method, and it was pretty efficient. And yeah, so that's what has happened.
Excellent.
Welcome
Thanks,
back to
Catherine.
school.
Yeah. Mr. Smith.
I'm happy to be back. Actually, many of them were. They had a chance to reunite, and then the reality of the academics set in, and now they're wishing for February vacation.
But then they enjoyed the new carpet.
Yes, yes. The interest new carpet. Thank you to the community and the budget, and to Ralph Kelly and his crew. We have new carpeting that has been installed in our 2 lobbies, as well as the connecting lobby in front of the main office. It's actually a very efficient system that has the ability to cut squares out, so if we did have some major flooding or an issue, we could replace a piece of the carpet without having to pull all of the carpet up. As a result, we've had to make some adjustments for some of our students during break and during lunch. They can still sit in those lobbies, but they have to be off from the tile or in the cafeteria during those time periods. And for the most part, it's worked fine. It's been, a little bit of change, and sometimes change is a little bit hard, but we want to protect the investment. Carpets look great. We're really excited. I was in one of the days when the crew was working on it. The crew was really efficient. I was very, very impressed by their work. And so we're happy. We got a new sparkling look in the main lobby.
It really brightened up the lobby.
It did. It's nice. It's a little bit darker, so I think it will help cover because it's, as you know, there's a lot of traffic in and out of there every day. So we're excited about that. I just wanted to point out a couple of things just before we left for the break. We had our holiday concert with performances from all of our different performing ensembles, our chorus, our band, our jazz band, and our acapella concert was outstanding. Great variety of music, and really a kudos to our music educators for really putting together, I thought, really a fabulous show. Really wide, diverse music, which was fantastic. In addition, in your packets, I included some information about our Acapella Group, which won a local regional competition. Very, very proud of them, and if you've never had a chance to see Acapella perform, they are amazing. They are a student-run, student-led group. Very, very proud of them, with some incredible talent in there. In many cases, they're kids who sing outside of school, who are in our performances, our drama productions, and really add, I think, a lot of pride to our school. In addition to that, I wanted to pass around to you, this is a 2015 calendar that the Art Club has put together, a little fundraiser that they have to help pay for the production of this, as well as some after-school supplies. This is a group that will meet after school. Ms. Osiecki is their advisor. And they put together this wonderful calendar that has numerous photos, some of it is photography, different formats of their artwork. And you still have a few more copies. And after that has circulated back, I'd like to give that as a gift to Mr. Robinson for all of his support of the arts over the years. And I think hopefully he'll enjoy those photos through all of these months.
You honor me, sir. Thank you.
The only other thing that I just wanted to mention is in early January, one of my big focuses will be the formation of a search committee, interview committee for the new athletic director. As you know, we will be hiring a new athletic director with the position taking effect July 1st. That committee will be represented by Regional School Committee, Athletic Advisory, boosters, parents at large, students, as well as some faculty, coaches, myself, and probably a couple other members. And we have, in your packet, you have a timeline. We're looking to have our first organizational meeting next week, with the ideal to have an appointment, if all goes well, and a final name just early March. With some opportunity for that person to do a little transition visiting in the spring, similar to I had that pleasure and that opportunity, and was really beneficial, and that person would then start July 1st.
That's great. Thank you, Mr. Smith, for your leadership with that search. It's a very prominent search committee for a very important position here at the region in particular, and arguably for the whole school system, really. And we thank you for that. And there'll be an opportunity when we do have finalists for the entire regional school committee during the day of the site visit to spend some time with the finalists, as we've done with some other positions. I think that was your intent.
That is correct, as well as there'll be a full public forum, so parents will have an opportunity, students will have an opportunity, faculty, etc.
Sure.
So everyone will have that opportunity to provide feedback to myself and to Mr. Bliss prior to any decisions being made.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Can I ask one question?
Absolutely.
The there was National Association Assessment of Educational Progress
Yes.
exam coming
Yeah.
up. You said in 5th grade. And I understand we are mandated to do
Yes.
this. You are
Gift that keeps on giving.
the command performance. And I have lost track. How often has Dover-Sherborn been?
So lucky.
Yeah, we did not last year, but in speaking to Ms. Lonergan, they did the year before. And sometimes it isn't necessarily just that grade 12. So this year, the group selected, the cohort is grade 12. Some years it is grade 9. And
as well.
Kelly has to do it too. It's interesting. They claim it's random. I find that many high-performing schools are chosen more frequently.
Random out of the bucket.
Yeah.
So, that was my first question. I did a little searching. Apparently 100 schools per state or something like that, which is an extraordinary number, in fact. So I don't feel quite so picked upon. But nonetheless, it's a significant amount of time for the seniors.
And how do we pick the 15?
They choose them. So we provide them with the updated roster, and then they do
What's his name?
Yes, they
Just
do a random
name.
selection. So there'll be students, regular ed students, special education students, students who might have a 504, could be ELL students. And, but we do send out letters where parents do have an opt-out. So for those students who were randomly chosen, there is an opt-out option for parents. And if we don't hear back, then we keep that list. If we have some opt-outs, then it's our responsibility to tell them we have this many opt-outs. They then submit more names to us. The difficult part, Claire, is there's not a lot of incentive for our seniors.
Right.
We've got great kids. I know that our kids will take the test seriously. They like to do well. They unfortunately don't receive individual results either. So the only results that we receive, not even as a school, the only results we'll receive is as a state, how did we do. NAEP does do all the proctoring, so I'm there and I'm present and I'm doing the conference calls with them. They will bring in the laptops, they bring in all the equipment. We just have to provide the room. They even pay, if you want to have an additional proctor there, they do pay that. So there's no cost, but it's still a distraction of the...
Is there a reward for the students?
No.
There is not, but what we have done and we have plans is to have some sort of incentive for them.
It would be nice.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Spinach.
What's that?
Spinach.
Spinach.
Can't.
Questioning your parenting back. Oh, okay.
Richard Spinach.
All right, thank you guys. Off to score. Thank you guys. All right, thank you, Mr. Smith. Moving on to the central office update. Mr. Bliss.
Thank you, Ms. White. Good evening, Regional School Committee, viewing audience, esteemed colleagues. Pleasure to be here at the beginning of the new year. And in terms of the school start times initiative, there is much to report, but I think the most efficient course of action would probably be to have a lot of that, a lot of the update provided at the joint school committee meeting in February probably makes the most sense. I will tell you that in this very venue, we had a meeting yesterday afternoon with all 19 members of the School Start Times Committee, one of many, and I think it was a great working session. Mr. Robinson was there on behalf of the Regional School Committee. We have all the survey data from all the surveys that were developed and administered, and the School Start Times Committee is perusing all of the data that's come back and looking at some different scenarios and options and action, course of action in terms of the proposal.
So there'll be some kind of presentation or...
February, there'll be
Okay.
something more substantive. Absolutely.
Great.
We also want to make sure we recognize Coach Dara Johnson as a TVL Coach of the Year. So congratulations to Coach Johnson. We want to welcome Linda Getchell, who is the new Secretary, Administrative Assistant in the Guidance Office at the high school. Linda began with us on Monday, I believe. She is a wonderful addition to the Guidance Office. So, and she replaces someone who had left our employ. So that's not a new position, that's a replacement. Included in the report also is a statement about the notices of intent. That's simply to draw the committee's attention that if we were to make any changes, obviously tonight, or if this committee were to, with respect to our capital request for fiscal 16, make sure we make note of that and correspond with Sherman Advisory Dover warrant. Ms. Green will speak to the Accept Collaborative Transportation Pricing Methodology in just a moment. There is information in your packet about that. And also included in the packet is a document that was sent to Governor Patrick on December 5th concerning the signed by a number of legislators, including both reps from Dover and Sherborn who had signed on to this letter. And it's essentially an appeal to the governor asking the $18 million that's proposed to be cut from regional transportation in the way of a Chapter 71 cut, that in fact not be enacted. And we're expecting to hear more in the way of any 9 C cuts actually this week that we have reason to believe from the Mass Association of Regional School Committees that we will have some indication the week of January 5th about the impending 9 C cut. So we'll keep you informed as we learn more, and as I'm sure the media will cover that. The Mass Association of Regional School Committees has also created and has asked all regional school committees to consider contributing $500 towards a legal fund. And the purpose of that legal fund, as indicated in your report, is essentially to retain counsel to look at the 2010 legislation, which speaks to the fact that the governor, the assertion is that the governor does not have the jurisdiction to reduce regional transportation by way of Chapter 71 cuts, anything greater than what would be local aid cuts. So essentially, if something that transportation would be in a hold harmless only insofar as Chapter 70 would be as well. So Chapter 70 local aid, Chapter 71 regional transportation. And the assertion being that if in fact this 2010 legislation is upheld, the governor would not have the prerogative to invoke this proposed $18 million cut. And we throw it out to Ms. White and to the regional school committee to determine if there's a desire to contribute to $500 to this legal defense fund. Ms. White?
Wouldn't, if you had to keep it equal, why wouldn't you just do 9 and 9 from Chapter 70 to Chapter 71?
I'm not, I can't, if you're asking, because I was way out.
Legislative approval
Right.
in order to get reductions in Chapter 7.
Oh, okay, that's a good
So
reason.
that holds him.
All right, so,
And how should we pay Mars for membership?
membership, I was just thinking that same
I
question.
do not believe we pay Mars for
Do we pay Mars for
membership.
membership?
Mars annual membership, I have to look it
Oh,
up.
I think we do, but it's about 2,500, somewhere in that area.
If we do not, this has already been tested, and the determination was that the governor can in fact move forward with this. So I don't know what they expect to hear differently. My recommendation would not necessarily contribute to $500 to the fund. If there's a determination, we'll benefit from it. But
So, sorry, when you said it's already been tested, when was it tested?
it was,
before?
Mars indicates that a few years ago this was put to the test, and that in fact it was determined that when they put this before council at that point that they weren't prepared to uphold the 2010 legislation that would restrict the governor's prerogative, was what they learned at that time.
Maybe I'm confused.
So they're shopping
Wait,
for a
who's-
different.
They're shopping for a different
Yeah.
So who
response.
was not prepared to uphold? I don't understand.
Whatever
those are
council
terms.
that they're
Yeah,
retaining.
Whatever the
But-
council
but-
did.
Yep, they put this before council a couple of years ago.
But what are they alleging about the legislation?
That the legislation restricts the governor from making this kind of
Right,
drastic
if you're not
cut.
gonna cut 70, you can't cut 71.
Right.
And they found counsel that says, who said, I don't think you're right.
Right.
Okay. And now they're shopping for other counsel.
Do we have any interest in contributing to the legal fund?
I wish I had a better sense of what
Potential outcome?
the likelihood of prevailing was. I mean, if it,
Could we get an input from any of our legislators on
Yes.
its merit?
Sure.
If they signed a letter complaining, maybe they've had a staff member
Yeah.
look at that issue
Yeah.
already, and if there's something favorable, then it would make sense, I think, for us to move
Or if they
forward.
find an attorney who's interested in,
Right.
you know, we don't,
yeah, I mean, one could imagine, I have no connection
somebody
whatsoever.
would always be interested in
Yes.
the job.
Exactly. No, I was going to take it from the other point, is that one could imagine that an organization, Mars might be such an organization, would say, how can we remain relevant? I know, let's put this together without having any sense that in fact it's that they're likely to prevail. That obviously is not worth supporting, but you know, if there's a case to be made, a good case to be made, I'd say sure.
Or even how is the $500 arrived at? So take $500 from every single regional school district.
How many
It
are
seemed to get in the legal opinion.
How many are there?
Oh, if there are 100,
30.
there can't be more.
This just feels like something that's so out there and high profile. It seems hard to believe that the governor's council didn't vet this pretty
Right.
thoroughly before he put it out there. can't believe the governor just said, let's try this without it being vetted pretty carefully.
Right.
In 2 days, he's not going to do that.
There is that.
I'm happy to send an email to Dave Linsky and to Denise Garland.
Sounds good.
I think if they have staff, they can tell us if it's a worthwhile endeavor.
Good point.
Sure. We'll take care of that.
All
And
right.
do we have any sense of what our timeline is for being a part of this training?
By the time we come back to
By
that.
the time you next meet, so I don't know if the committee wants to take sort of a conditional vote, that if it's at the recommendation of the legislators, that you were gonna, yeah. Doesn't seem to be. I'll at least let you know what the legislature.
Perfect.
Sound good?
All right.
Also included in your packet is information concerning the DESE flexibility waiver. A couple of years ago, the Commonwealth applied for a waiver with respect to how schools are evaluated every year. This has actually worked really well for a number of districts that, because it looks at a data collection mechanism over a couple of years, as opposed to looking at MCAS scores and in a snapshot in time for one particular academic year. So this flexibility waiver that Commonwealth receives, not Dover-Sherborn, it's a Commonwealth application. And I just thought it was important to include some of the pros and cons of that evaluation system. From our estimation, it has worked very well in terms of not catapulting a lot of schools, very analogous to us, into different kind of performance categories based on one snapshot in time. So we just thought it important that the regional school committee have a little bit of language around that, including your packets, so we have that as well. There's information on the status of the Educator Evaluation system. There's also a very nice picture that was taken on the field that was then featured in the Boston Globe. We thank Bill Scatcherd, of course, and everyone who's part of the DS Boosters. That was a fantastic article featuring the incredible support we enjoy from DS Boosters. So we thank everyone involved in that effort. And just to highlight again what Mr. Kellett shared, it was just our pleasure to have Dr. and Mrs. Mudge with us, as well as their son with us, their son Andrew, at the opening performance of Annie. It was a very special evening for the Mudge family, and we thank Amy Davis and her husband for being there and being such an important part of that evening as well. The school, there's a conference sponsored by the Harvard Medical School, January 30th through the 31st, to which we'll be sending a small cohort of individuals. This is the school mental health conference. And we've included in the outline of the learning objectives related to that conference. Just to highlight again, the Chemical Health Night, to put a plug in for March 9th, and the Internet Safety Night for February 12th. And also, under the other schools' news, just to raise awareness that Chickering will now have an integrated preschool program, which is very exciting. So Pine Hill, for a number of years, has had an integrated preschool program, and we'll be creating one, and we thank obviously Dover Warrant, Dover Board of Selectmen, Dover School Committee for really following the evolution of that program. It's critically important to us in terms of providing services for students in the school. And also the Pine Hill School News, we have to put a plug in for the Brainbusters, who scored 3rd place at the recent competition. You'll recall they won the global competition last year, and I was pleased and privileged to go to their session at WPI a couple weekends ago. So it was we had some great fun there. I think it was December 20th.
Great.
So, thank you so much.
Excellent.
Thank you.
All right, Dr. Ludy, or is where are you going?
You have some information in your package regarding the accept transportation and their new formula for calculating transportation costs. There's a little one-page in the front summary of the program itself, and then the PowerPoint that we were provided by Accept. Basically, what Accept has done over in the past, it's a per mile cost for school systems for students. They've now gone to a weighted point system where students are given point values based on, for example, 1 is if you're transported within the district, 2 if you're transported to Accept, and so on. And then what they do is for all of the districts who participate in their transportation program, they total the number of points, and you're given, your school system is determining what the percentage of points is for your district, and based on that, what percentage of their total budget you are going to be assessed for transportation. So it's a very different model than what we have now, and there's some pros and cons to the program. One thing is that we will receive a cost calculation for the entire year, and that cost remains constant, whether we add students to transportation with accept or take students from transportation. So this will mean that there will be some fluctuation year to year. There will be years where there will be some significant savings for the districts. Other years there might be a little more cost than it would have been if they calculated it per mile. The proposed snapshot for the numbers for next year was taken on November 13th of this year and will be done at a point each year. So they will take a snapshot of the number of students that you have in the transportation program, and that's what they'll base our costs on. One of the difficulties is that the calculated costs are from September to June only, does not include the summer transportation. And that's partially because that's so much more difficult to calculate. Students sometimes are recommended for summer programs but do not go, or they don't go for the entire program. So that cost will be calculated separately at a per mile, the previous per mile calculations. So we are just getting firm numbers now from Accept Transportation. It looks like, for one of the districts, some cost savings, for the other district, maybe not cost savings, but that will fluctuate from year to year. But it may be difficult for us because based on what they're going to choose as a snapshot date, we begin our budget process very early, and so we're going to need to get those snapshots from them as early as possible so that we can calculate our costs. And we're going to be updating each of the towns regarding what that looks like for us next year.
So do they have a date in mind, or?
For the annual snapshot.
Yeah.
So that's when representing
So I assume
you on the
that's
board.
Sorry, Steve, going to work like a regional agreement that on a given date.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Yes.
So they're looking at November 1st, between the first couple weeks of November, what they're looking at for a snapshot. So that worked. And that was my one concern that I voiced to the Accept Board of Directors as a voting member on your behalf. I said that it concerns me that the date may be too late for us because our budget season begins early. So I didn't want for that date to be, because that could really throw a kink in our budget if the date were much later.
And when do they approve their total budget? So they go line item of $500,000, whatever it is, in transportation, but they then divvy back among us. When do they come to that number?
So they'll arrive at that number, obviously before that November date, they'll already have their projections for the following year. So it's interesting.
So Chris would be able to forecast a little bit more.
They're going to do a first couple weeks of November determination for which budget.
The following school year.
Why is that not plenty early for us?
Well, we do our budget for Sherborn, we deliver that before Thanksgiving. So we're really building that in earnest at the very beginning of November.
It's kind of real time.
It's just there's so many pieces of the budget that don't come in.
Well, the regions.
Right, but that's why I was saying Chris could forecast. So
Yeah,
that they
right.
know the line item number.
Right.
She knows how many students roughly.
And so Audrey has done a great job. Audrey is the out-of-district coordinator, working very closely with Terry, and Terry reporting up to Chris. It works very well. So we're still massaging those numbers to make sure that we're landing where we had thought within shooting range. So just keep in mind, of course, those costs, while programmatically associated with students that may be regionally aged, they are embedded in the local budgets for each of the elementary schools.
Is the individual cost per student, the actual cost, not these calculated costs, the actual cost, do they fluctuate unexpectedly during the year? No. So that's not really going to be an issue in determining the fairness of this new system.
Well, our vulnerability was as students who come
Numbers.
off
Right,
us,
so that was going to be my
our
question.
loan students, right?
What if
And
somebody
you'll get
moves
the
in,
effect
how
of
does
following.
You get the benefit for the rest of the year.
And if someone moves out?
You're
overpaying for that. Exactly.
Yeah, you get the benefit for a year and a half.
No, you'll reset the fine. All right.
Anyway,
Um,
that sounds good.
any
This is
other
a done
questions?
deal. We're not voting.
No, there's no
Yeah.
vote needed. This is a done deal, and so
Excellent.
thank you, Ms. Green.
Thank you.
before we leave, Terry, I wanted to email you, Terry. I don't think we've told everyone about the new CPAC brochure, have we? That's online?
No, we have not.
Would you like to do that?
Absolutely, yes. And the CPAC group did a fabulous job designing a new brochure that we provide to parents of students who are coming in new to the special education programs, to let them know about the CPAC and what they do and how to contact everyone. So they developed a very beautiful brochure. It is now online as part of this CPAC information. So parents can go online and view that. And we're also, as I said, providing them to parents at meetings as new students are identified for programming. So they've done a great job. They've done a lot of work actually on the CPAC website itself. The group has really done a very good job of it.
Very colorful.
It is.
It's really nice. Sarah nicely done it, and they worked well with Terry and her staff to accomplish all that.
And they're going out to print, so we'll have those soon.
Great.
And by Wednesday.
That's nice. Excellent. All right, Dr. Ledoux.
I wanted to provide an update about the wellness committee goings on. We have a full wellness committee on Mr. Bliss.
Yep.
On January 26th with the full wellness committee coming together to discuss the food service, the wellness policy subgroup, and the stress and anxiety subgroup, and what's the other happenings that are happening. So I'm going to highlight a few. The food service subgroup met on December 8th, and John Ledrick from Educator came and did a great succinct presentation surrounding the Educator report. I had also provided the group with the succinct notes that Mr. Bliss had put together for the regional school, the combined union school committee, excuse me. So Mr. Ledrick spoke about the quality of the food served and the effectiveness of the food service as something to highlight. The shelter and rooftops, what's happening at both at Sugar and Pine Hill and at the region. He also highlighted the need to create a strategic vision, to improve financial modeling, to proactively communicate food service, and to look at facilities and equipment needs. And some of those things have been brought forward through the school committee. Ms. Madden has, prior to that meeting, developed an action plan which looks at three areas: staff training, marketing, and menu and selection and presentation. Ms. Madden, Mr. Bliss, and I had met to follow up and talk about those action steps and to talk about what's going to happen next. And I'll be working closely with her about the communication aspect of food service and Ms. Teddy, the financial modeling, and Mr. Bliss overseeing all of it. So it was a great meeting, and we'll meet again sometime in the early spring. The Wellness Policy Subgroup met October 6th and November 17th to talk about the wellness implementation guidelines in the areas of physical and emotional health, nutrition, physical activity, and how we're going to look at how that, the referral of the draft policy back to the Wellness Subcommittee. And I've reached out to the School Committee Policy Subcommittee to get some feedback on the policy. So we'll get together in late January. And then the stress and anxiety subgroup met on December 4th, and just to update members of the Challenge Success, Mr. Bliss has provided a very succinct synopsis of what's been happening with that. But just today I attended a session with Challenge Success presenting to our middle school and high school staff on some of the data from the surveys and some of the perceptions around high school and middle school areas of stress and anxiety. That same presentation will happen at Chickering and Pine Hill February 10th. So there's a lot happening in the area of wellness. And then I just wanted to mention that the Educator Evaluation, the first round of Educator Evaluations are completed, 3 in number for all those who are on the evaluation. 1-year self-directed growth plan and non-professional teacher status. Upcoming we'll be looking at teacher goals and evaluating them for the mid-year. And that we're administering the district determined measures currently and looking at how we collect that data and how it informs instruction and determines how we can measure student growth over these next 2 years as the educator impact rating. That also is in flux at the DESE. So I think the work that Dover-Sherborn does is the right work, and we don't do it because the DESE asks us to. We do it because it gives us some great information about our work, what our students know, and understand and can explain. So cool stuff happening around here. And at a later in the meeting, I'll talk about the international students.
Great. Excellent. All right.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, I wanted to update the committee, just a couple of things.
Oh, yeah.
The next thing here is regarding special education. So there are a couple of things I want to highlight. One is that I've been working with the CPAC group, and we're developing surveys for parents and for staff around the whole special education reorganization to get some sense from the parent point of view and staff point of view how the reorganization has gone and how well supported everyone is in the process, so that we can determine if there are some additional steps we should be thinking about or planning for. And then the other, I just wanted to say, I could not be more pleased with how well the whole language-based program has been developing, and the work that's been done that goes far beyond the services that our language-based specialist is providing, but looking at the program itself and where we are currently and where we need to go to provide really good services to students. And I couldn't be more pleased. Nan Layton really deserves a kudos for the hard work she's done, and she's working so well with staff, and staff really are enjoying working with her. So just wanted to bring that forward and say we're working with Dan Larson and doing a lot of good work there.
Excellent. All right. Chris.
Well, we have the December appropriations report as well as a revenue report. The only remarkable variance at this time is there's a negative variance, the business manager's function code, and it's primarily as a result of
Your trip to where?
no, it's as a result of retirement. Betty Canigliera retired. She's still on our payroll, however, till January 2nd, so the encumbrance is there, as well as an encumbrance for a training an individual, a temporary individual who will eventually train the permanent position. We have to keep paying our bills. So once those encumbrances are liquidated, we should be in a better position on that function code. As far as capital, all of the major projects, with the exception of the doors, service doors, and at the Linquist, the doors at the Linquist, that's anticipated to be done after the completion of the school year, and the concrete is anticipated to be done in April recess. Other than that, one other thing I learned about the FY budget process, because we have a new governor-elect, he has an extra 5 weeks to present his budget, which brings us to March 4th. Now, whether he does take that opportunity is another issue, but additionally, the rate-setting meeting is tentatively scheduled for healthcare on February 12th, the day after our big joint.
That's true. I know.
So that's it.
Thank you, Chris.
All right. Thank you, Chris. All right. So I think what we'd like to do is, sorry to those of you who I know were waiting on the discussion of the leadership reconfiguration, is I'd like to move to allow our financial experts to report out so that they can not necessarily sit through that part of our discussion if they prefer not to.
Well, and, just as you guys know, we did have the fiscal audit completed recently, June 30, 2014. And this year, we just engaged new auditors, R.E. Brown & Company, because our prior auditors, he retired from public accounting. So we had to get new auditors in here. And R.E. Brown & Company is an auditing firm that does many municipalities in the Commonwealth, has lots of experience. And with us tonight, we have Bob Brown, who is the senior partner with Brown & Company, and present his findings and results. I'll just make one comment that thank goodness the audit was unqualified. There were no findings or question costs. But Mr. Brown can speak to the results of the audit, and I'll turn it over to him.
Good evening. As Jim mentioned, we're new to the district. Just want to mention, my firm has been auditing local government since 1987, and that's all we do. So every level of staff we send out has quite a bit of experience and they're used to the municipal setting. And we hope that's efficient, for the client as well. We performed the fiscal 14 audit. Everything went well. Your finance team does a really good job. We offered no adjustments. The town does operate, the district, does operate on a prescribed accounting system for the Commonwealth. So there's quite a few changes that we do convert to get a GAAP version of the financial statements. Since 2003, there was a major change in how the statements are presented. And one thing I like to try and let everyone know, there's really two sets of statements in here. Page 10 to 12, it's like a full accrual, one column. This is your whole district with everything you owe and everything you own. Pages 13 and 14 are more what you're used to seeing. There's a general fund column. There's a column for your major special revenue funds, your community education, and your other special revenue funds. So, we refer to those as a fund level statement, and those are far more readable and convertible to what you see in your normal operations. The audit was, it went well, and it was also uneventful as far as what happened during your year. We did note, you've got several bond anticipation notes for several projects, and you're paying them down annually, which we like to see. Nothing else of note that was unusual. One thing I do like to mention, what's coming down the pike in the future. Fiscal 15 is going to be a significant change. The full accrual statements are going to absorb the unfunded pension liability that you have with the county. Now, obviously, that's not, the teachers are a separate issue, but to the extent you have employees that are in the county system, the unfunded liability is going to hit your books all at once next year. So, unfortunately, that's a negative. Your fund balance will be affected, but everybody's fund balance is going to be affected. The towns will be affected more because they'll have far more participants in the plan. So it'll be affecting your local towns that support you, as well as the district to a lesser extent. But everybody's in the same boat. Everybody's got unfunded pension liabilities. Some counties, the systems might be doing better than others, but I don't think any of them are doing fantastically. It will affect bond ratings from one town to another. A few years ago, you started having to start recording your post-employment benefits obligation for future retirees and current employees for when you have to pay their health insurance on retirement. That original model followed the original pension reporting. Since they changed the pension reporting and the entire liability is going on your books, the same thing is unfortunately going to happen with the post-employment benefits in a few years. The exposure draft to change that is out right now. So that is going to be another negative on the full accrual statements. But you're in the same boat as everybody else. It's going to happen to everybody. So, bond raters always knew these liabilities were out there. And if, relatively everybody's in the same boat, I don't expect it to actually change ratings, but it certainly makes your full accrual statements look worse. Other than that, I'm open to any questions you may have.
Any questions for Mr. Brown?
Bob, the OPEB liability, what's the growth on that? It's about, what is it, about $1 million from approximately 4 years next for these? Just shy of that, maybe?
I'll get the number. It went up $1 million.
Page 45.
Yeah, it went up $1,047,000 last year. So, if you look at the full accrual balance sheet on page 10, your unrestricted number shows a negative, but if you didn't have the post-employment benefits liability, the last line just above total liabilities of $5,000,009, you'd have a positive balance in that. Every year post-employment benefit liability is going to keep pushing you downward and from a financial presentation point of view.
In the back, you have some of the schedules relating to retirement and all. Will our county-provided retirement fund be required to start to evaluate that liability on a unit-by-unit basis?
They do already.
Or, but it's pooled.
It was pulled for this presentation.
Okay.
For fiscal 15, when this unfunded pension liability is going to have to hit everybody's books, they've had to do a new study in a different way than they've done it before. And they have to evaluate every local government separately and come up with a liability just for them. And, you know, for some of our clients that have enterprise funds as well, we hope that they also break it up for the enterprise funds within the local government.
So that will change. And for us, it should be a favorable change, most likely, because we don't have public service employees.
Well, your share, it's not an absolute equatable calculation, but I think your share is about 1.1% of the annual contribution. So if there's a liability, unfunded liability of 260 million, there's 20 million. You know, 1.1% of that, it would be a very, very rough calculation of what is going to happen next year, a number that's going to come onto your books.
But our liability profile will be based upon our set of employees
Yes.
now.
Yes.
Versus right now, we're pooled in with towns that have police and fire who have significantly different pension benefits and retire early.
Correct.
Okay.
They'll look at your employee pool, and then all the investments are pooled in together, but they'll come up with a separate.
We'll take our share of the assets out.
Correct.
We'll have a fee against a different, hopefully more favorable liability.
Right.
I just received the assessment for FY16, and the study Bob's referring to was referenced. I can send that out.
Any other questions for Mr. Brown? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Can we have the school committee vote to accept the audit? Because we need to do that.
Oh, you need that?
One more question.
Yes.
Sure.
Oh,
So
no one
any
has
of the-
more questions?
So of your clients that you audit in the municipal industry, so to speak, are any of them putting aside funds above their pay-go amount for their OPEBs?
About a third have started putting in nominal amounts, but you know, it's more of a show item because it's just not enough to address the reliability. I have a couple of towns that have put away a good amount of money because they had some external windfall that was unusual, and they were able to, you know, move that money.
Painlessly.
Yeah, something they didn't expect every year, so you know, it wasn't part of the normal revenue process of the annual budget. You know.
Yes, exactly. All right, so, do I have a motion to accept
I make a
the,
motion to accept the report on examination of basic financial statements dated June 30th, 2014.
noting that I've always wanted to be called Honorable School Committee. I like that. All right, do we have a second?
No, sir.
All right.
language.
All right, any other discussion? No, all those in favor? Aye. All right, unanimous. Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. Welcome to
I think it's
our Dover-Sherborn.
we welcome good clients. First off, we consider you a very good client. If I didn't say it before, the staff would be good. They made everything smoothly. You know, first year was always a little extra work, but it was.
Thank you
well.
to Chris and the team. Sorry, Jeff, yeah.
Jim, we're going to do the vote.
There's a question in the back.
Can I make a couple comments?
If they're short, yep.
I'll try to make them as short
Okay.
as possible. As part of the presentation tonight,
Oh, sorry, can you just let everybody know?
I'm sorry, my name is Jeff Merrill, and I'm a member of the Dover Warrant Committee. there's the document proposed fiscal year operating budget discussion points. And on page 3.18, it is a discussion about the OPEB information. And I would make a request that under the headings underneath, there's a single line that says annual contribution. And I think that's a misnomer. I think as the audit report shows, it's really the annual cost versus the contribution.
We haven't gotten to this document though yet, Joe.
I'm sorry.
No problem. You're just one step ahead of us. But hold that thought, because then we'll definitely make sure that we get it accurate in here. Perfect. Awesome. Do you have anything specific, Mr. Brown?
It's not anything.
No, I don't.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. All right, hold that. I'll try and remember if I forget.
That's all right.
Yeah,
You got it, Joe.
all right. All right, Mr. Eggert, and then,
Just one other thing.
Absolutely.
On a vote by school committee.
Yes.
And that is on the refunding ones. I know that Margaret McLean from Meter Bank is looking for that vote to be determined by the school committee tonight, because she needs it by next week.
we have the motion, yes. Ms. Claire, would you like to, yes, would you like to make the motion? And then hand it right down
Let
to
it be
me.
voted that in order to reduce interest costs on outstanding debt, the district is authorized to issue bonds or notes for the purpose of refunding all or any portion of its $15,500,000 general obligation bonds dated November 1, 2005, including, if any, the payment of any premium and accrued interest associated therewith and all other costs incidental and related thereto under and pursuant to Chapter 44, Section 21A of the Massachusetts General Laws or any other enabling authority.
Well done. All right.
You know your stuff.
Second, do I have a second?
Okay.
All right, any discussion on that?
So we're authorizing to go forward. If for some reason there's an adverse interest rate event between now and the
February
date that we
2nd.
would pull the trigger,
February 5th.
She will hold it and discuss it with the school committee
So-
and not go forward.
okay, so we would convene a special meeting if need be to potentially revoke or at least discuss.
I spoke to her today, and she said that it is still very favorable.
Yeah.
And if we go out at the beginning of February, a lot of times, there's not as many communities going out at that time, so there will be a lot of interest, especially since our bond rating is AAA.
And do we go through a re-rating as part of
Yes.
this, or we
No.
have a rating on?
We already have a AAA rating.
But they'll just review
They'll
the
just review the
financials.
fact that we submitted that yes, we have a new rating, and it is AAA, so it should be really, hopefully take off.
All right, Richard.
I am a complete naive here, and I apologize if this question is simple. I understood Michael's question, which is that it's if it doesn't look like it's going to save us money in the long run, we don't do it. That makes great sense. And I think I understood from last month's discussion that if that happens, we will be out the cost of the bond rating reevaluation. Is that right?
Now, the cost, they won't go forward with any real costs unless we go forward.
Marginal
Marginal
costs.
Bond council, we have to speak with S&P, Standard & Poor's, next week. But the cost of that, we pay Meter Bank every year a fee, which I think is $2,000 for maintaining our account as their fiscal advisor, so it wouldn't be any more than that.
Right, that's right. And then if we do decide to go forward, are we out of pocket anything on this?
It gets netted against the benefit
Right now, it
of
was
the
in the statement
interest
we
payments.
received
Right,
last month.
exactly. All right, any other discussion? All right, so let's vote. All those in favor of the motion? All right, unanimous, thank you. All right, thank you, Mr. Brown and Mr. Eggert.
Thank you. Mr. Eggert, we just really want to thank you. You continue to provide just stellar service to the regional school district, the regional school committee, and it's years upon years of service, and we thank you. Look forward to it.
Thank you very much.
See you on February 5th when we hopefully will price a successful offer.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
All right, perfect. Okay.
And in general, people still understand there's no savings to be transferred anywhere.
Sure.
It
We'll get to,
reflects
well,
that.
that'll,
Okay.
that's in
Is
the
that
talking
the
points.
budget? Okay.
Yes. Okay. Excellent. All right, so now back to our regularly scheduled listening. Let's start in with the update number 3, shall we?
Sure.
All right.
So this is ACED update. It's becoming a monthly event. This is on the instructional leadership reconfiguration. Unlike the bad penny, I just keep coming back to the well. This is
We let them meet. So.
Yeah, that's right. So the ACD met, as you know, we began discussing last month, and this position has been discussed at the elementary school committees as well, both Dover and Sherborn. One of the initial concerns with the position from a financial perspective was, you'll recall, was the cost sharing allocation. So this update before you this evening has this reconsidered slightly. In terms of the allocation of the cost, so if I draw your attention to the page 2, the colorful page, towards the bottom of the proposed, it has the Fine Arts Department chair position listed, and in the parenthetically it notes cost share by district based on FTE share. The region actually employs 61% of our FTEs, teachers. Sherborn 18%, Dover 21%. So the breakdown in the actual colored section down below, the yellow, pink, and blue, breaks down the cost per district. So the elementary school committees have not yet seen this revised version, but have seen it through electronic communications, haven't had a chance to publicly discuss it yet. But this was one of the issues with the elementary school committees. Another concern that was raised, entirely valid, was about the real instructional benefits of a fine arts department chair, K through 12. So some of our fine arts teachers, in particular Janice Barry from Chickering and Kathy Simino from the region, with a ton of collaborative input, have actually put together a very compelling document. And I have a copy here for everyone. And there should be some extras for the audience as well. Thank you. We'll let it get around the table here. Thank you. So using a Google Doc format, a number of teachers contributed to this particular document and talked about what they're calling the DSFADC, Dover-Sherborn Fine Arts Department Chair. We love acronyms. And walked through segment by segment the Dover-Sherborn Fine Arts Department Chair as a curriculum leader. And the second bullet point, you can read this certainly perhaps after the meeting, the Dover-Sherborn Fine Arts Director as a meeting organizer, as the inventory manager, as an instructional coach, as an enrichment coordinator, are all the areas that the teachers have really, they responded to the request put forward by the 3 school committees to better understand what the instructional underpinnings of this position are, and wanted to put this document forward for your review. It was literally finished at about 5:45 this afternoon, so we didn't have the benefit of including it in the packet, but I wanted to make sure the regional school committee had this and had an opportunity to review this. In addition, we're privileged tonight to have Judy Miller and Mary Jane Brenner Brown with us as members of FOPA, who also, if it's okay with Ms. White, would like to speak perhaps on this issue.
Sure, absolutely.
Let's talk now.
As always, if it's nice and brief and to the point, that'd be awesome.
You know,
I figured that.
Mary Jane has notes, and I'm just sort of chalking off the top of my head. I really thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak. My friends and neighbors here, most of whom I've known for a long time. This is a position that is desperately needed because we have many students as they come up through the elementary schools and the middle schools and up to the high school who become involved in the arts, be that drawing, photography, fine arts, or performing arts, music, theater, musical theater / dance,
for many, many different reasons, other than that they are going to end up being artists as grown-ups. And those educational reasons are incredibly helpful to the rest of the curriculum and to the student body at large. In addition, we have a fantastic fine and performing arts program. I know that Mr. Kellett will agree that the production of Annie was spectacular. There were 100 students involved who were in the production, and then probably another 30 or 40 from both the middle and the high school who were part of that organization. We are sort of at a critical juncture. We have spent a long time, as many of you know, my children are I have a senior and a sophomore. Sorry, it's late. And we've spent a long time since my kids have come up through this program working to really enhance it, and we now need a coordinator for it to really bring it to a you know, we talked once, I heard people talk about going from good to great, and to bring it to the level of the great which we have in this school system. It'll be a wonderful enhancement, and it is, I understand, most other school districts have some form of a position that is this position. In addition, this is like a twofer, okay? Because what you get at the regional level is you also get someone who is dedicated to STEM, to engineering, to those issues on a 6 through 12 level. Instead of having the wonderful and lovely person whose name escapes me, who's in charge of fine and technical arts at the high school, Nick Brown, who is a fabulous guy, but he's an engineer. And it would be wonderful for him to take his full talent and apply that to the engineering 6 through 12. I mean, I'm not giving him the job, but I don't mean to say that, but you know what I mean, whoever is in that position.
You never mince your words.
I never do. I will never be accused of that. But it's a wonderful opportunity to really, to really enhance the offerings in a fairly economical way, and enhance it for many students. The kids like my kids, and the kids who, may be doing chemical engineering or, those types of endeavors. I'm going to let Mary Jane speak because her words are far more organized than mine. But thank you, and I would like to say this. If you have doubts or reasons why you don't think this is such a good idea or an economical idea, call me, email me. I'd be happy to talk to you about it. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Well, I don't know if I can top that. I'm perfectly honest, and I'm actually just going to sit here. But I too thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you and address you. I've sat in this room on other occasions when the subject has been one related to the fine and performing arts, and it's become clear to me over the years how committed this community and this administration and members of the school committee really are to ensuring that we have a top-notch program around the fine and performing arts. And I am so grateful to that continuing support for my own children who have benefited from it and for countless others. And I think Judy's point with respect to the way the new configuration can really help those students who are geared perhaps more in the direction of technology and engineering and things that are beyond the ken of a humble lawyer, in all honesty, is a really, really important one. So for me, there's just a host of reasons why this proposal really makes a lot of sense. It really contributes to student development. It contributes to their engagement, which I continue to see as really a huge issue, or issue's not the right thing, a huge important factor. To me, it's completely consistent with what we're trying to do for success in terms of really ensuring that the whole student is looked at and that we look at different
ways of measuring and thinking about success. And so it seems to me to be entirely consistent with where we're going. I see it as a way of enabling us to continue to strengthen the program, to ensure consistency, to make sure that the kids coming up are continuing to grow and be able to contribute, to ensure that there's coordination between the academic and the extracurricular, and again, finally, to just support the whole child to make sure that we are looking at a variety of means for success. And having a kid who just graduated last year had all the benefits of the music program here, and what's he doing at Bowdoin College? He's studying music theory and music composition and having a blast. And if we hadn't had the kind of support here, one example of somebody for whom that would have happened. So I do hope that you'll continue to consider this, and Steve and John and everyone, I really thank you for pushing forward with this idea, because I think it's really the next logical step in the continuing evolution of our support of these programs.
Thank you, Mary
Thanks
Jane.
for being here.
Thank you so much.
Questions or comments from our collective group on this issue? I know we've talked about it already, so.
Go ahead. No, I was gonna say, are we talking only about fine arts right now, or are we also talking about the technology,
So
engineering?
bring them both together.
Are we doing a
So
bit?
yes,
So,
we'd
yeah.
like to
Yes.
sort of package.
Because I feel like, personally, I feel like a very strong argument has made to support the fine arts change. And I feel like between the women here tonight and the document you just gave us and all the information, it's like, okay, you know what, it makes sense. This is the right direction for creating a cohesive performing arts department, K through 12. And so a question, this is really more a question that I have, is on position 2, the technology engineering department chair, doing a department chair versus a curriculum leader. I'm curious, and did we look at what do we need and would position 2 provide as a department chair versus a curriculum leader? I'm just curious.
Or coordinator, so.
Sure. So, John, do you want to jump in?
Yeah. One of the things, Carolyn, thinking about the fine arts director, you'd be putting somebody with area expertise who would be able to supervise and evaluate the curriculum, the instructional practices. So the same would be said for a department chair, which would enable them, grades 6 to 12, to supervise and evaluate not only the programming, but the actual educators.
And a curriculum leader can't.
Well, they
can't
insist that they
educators.
Right.
And how many technology and engineering, I guess, do we have instructors who only teach in the technology or engineering classes who would not be otherwise evaluated if there isn't a technology and engineering department chair? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So are
Yes.
these people teaching, are there people who would teach an engineering class who would be evaluated anyway under a different department because they also teach in another department? Or are there instructors who only teach in the engineering department and therefore need to be evaluated by an engineering department chair?
Well, right now, I'll just speak to the high school because certainly speak to the middle school. At the high school, there are a number of folks who teach some computer technology courses, also some application courses that involve the use of some of our computer labs. And in some cases, our math department chair has even taught a course. So there's been some crossover. In the case of that math department chair, because he is the department chair, he doesn't necessarily have anybody, so it would be me.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, to the current configuration, the LFTA director is Nicholas Grout. He supervises a range of people within some of the courses, but there is overlap too. So Jim Baruti will also then supervise some people who have some of the computer technology and some of the Java courses. So right now, we've got a couple different people supervising. What we're trying to do is create more streamlined. So I'm in favor because I think the 6 to 12 component can really help enhance our programming. But from a supervision evaluation standpoint, we would also have the most skilled people focusing in on those content areas, just like we do for English or world language within those areas. Right now, it is a few different people.
And how many people do we have to teach the technology or engineering?
4 at the high school, not 4 full-time. We've got Dick does. We have Darren Buck teaches some courses as well. We have L'Oreal Gary, who does some instructional support as well, and Diane Papafatopoulos, who also teaches a course, as does Mike Sweeney, who teaches a number of our media courses. So at the high school alone, we've got 4.
Can I say that a certain component of this is computer science? And I think as we look K-5 and transition students 6 through 12, it's extremely helpful for us as a system to prepare students for that computer science experience. You saw Mr. Keller talk about code.org. Someone to clearly articulate and supervise and evaluate for that. It's much the same conundrum I have when I go into a music classroom and I look at an ensemble. Sounds good to me, but when someone goes in with a lens of understanding the components of the ensemble, they can give that teacher more effective feedback. And it's the same with the computer science, technology, and engineering. Somebody who understands that content can give more effective feedback to push the envelope for what students know in the area what to do.
And we're also in the process right now through Karen's office of looking at and aligning. In fact, we have a meeting coming up on aligning the K through 5 computer science learning experience for students, so that that's closely mirrored, following a consistent curriculum. So it's an authentic computer science programming curriculum, and that it's not just sort of learning Word, Excel, PowerPoint. It's not applications based. It's a comp sci experience. K through 5, so that when those students feed into the middle school, there's a common language and a common experience around computer science to feed into the entire consistency of the model we're looking to promulgate. So it's very much consistent with a lot of our curricular efforts. But to your point, Carolyn, it would be wonderful, I'm sure would be pleased to put together a document that maybe outlines a little more of the instructional benefit behind the TE position, the technology engineering position, because certainly I think the instructional benefits document provided with respect to the fine arts is compelling. Michael?
So, with respect to the middle school, who is the source of the existing technical and engineering curriculum, and how would that change again in this model?
The source of
Do we pull it off the shelf? Is it from the DESC? Is it with something homegrown? The 1/4 course that happens 6th, 7th, and 8th grades.
Those courses they're taught by 2 individuals. The curriculum is something that we need to revisit as well, and as far as being in line with what the elementary is sending us, and go more into a computer.
But to help me understand, okay, if we have a specialist, they'll approach it one way, or somebody that's got expertise. How was it done in the past, and how did we get to what we have right now?
So Sandra Samarco teaches the computer courses right now, highly applications based, and not so, what we're envisioning doing is having this. It's actually a K through 8. It'll be a 6th, 7th, and 8th grade component to the code.org curriculum that we're looking to adopt through this. So there'll be actually a K through 8 continuum curriculum that will be adopted.
And then concurrent with that, Michael, are the IT classes that are industrial.
Yeah, so I mean the industrial tech, that's what I was more getting at, which to me
engineering
felt...
side of it, which we have some new classes we've offered in the last couple of years, which I would assume if we had a department chair just
But at
devoted
the
to
middle
6 to
school
12,
level,
we would see that grow.
the curriculum never really jumped out at me when I'd ask, what are you doing in this?
It's an adaptation.
This quarter.
It's an adaptation from the MOS model from the Museum of Science curriculum units that are put forward. So it's not a lockstep adoption of it, but it's a modification or an adaptation of the MOS units.
So the full year class, the full year class, they do that curriculum, Michael, for 3 quarters. It's supposed to be a year-long curriculum. They're doing that for 3 quarters, and the last quarter they're doing robotics.
Yeah. No, I was talking more at the middle school level.
Which is
Are these 2 positions, in terms of the total number of individuals or FTEs, I guess would be better, that they supervise, comparable to one another, comparable to the other department chairs that we have. In other words, the responsibilities roughly the same.
The technology engineering would oversee, there would be a department of about 7 or 8 people, and the fine and performing arts would be a department of about 10.
And how does
is
this
that
compare to the core courses, right?
to like English?
English
or
or
something?
history.
Yeah, that is in line. Yep.
Yep. So I know that, one of the concerns, and it's something we struggle with constantly, and it's the dynamic that is our reality, is our enrollment situation. So it's only fair to put that on the table. It's been discussed. We live it every day. I mean, we're building out budgets right now that, the Chickering budget calls for the reduction of 2 more teachers for next school year. We have the enrollment we think is sort of plateaued a little bit or stabilized at Pine Hill. We monitored registrations over the holiday recess. We saw a number of registrations at Chickering School over the course of the holiday recess, which was nice. There's been a lot of recent sales, home sales. So we monitor that, obviously. And it is a concern because, as you know, we grapple with it. Our bubble is at the region. And we have really depressed enrollments, at the elementary schools. In my estimation, that's all the more reason to try to fortify some of these folks so they're not in silos. I mean, so that you don't have just, one music teacher at Pine Hill, for instance, and 2 at Chickering. And this actually allows these folks to work together more collaboratively to ensure it's not so they feel good about it kind of thing. It's literally to ensure the integrity of the program for when they're all our kids. Dover-Sherborn to feed into the middle school, and the challenge for 6th grade teachers to try to reconcile what that experience was for students coming from the 2 schools has been problematic forever. I mean, we're trying to reconcile that.
So I just have 2 short things. One is, maybe 3. The percentage allocation, we're always we need to solve that. We're not going to solve it on this, but we're all over the place now.
Agreed.
In general, having
Yeah.
Of how, right, we have.
Pick your favorite allocation
Right.
for this one.
It used to be everything was a third, and
Right.
then somewhere along the way something changed, and now we're a jigsaw puzzle. The other is, this is adding 2 more sort of administrative positions, when those people who love numbers look at our district and go, the student-teacher ratio, the admin to student ratio, we're adding to that. And lastly, the budget. So this is going to cost us slightly more.
8.5.
And we have somewhat of a gap in our budget for next year. And this is where extra comp has always gotten stuck in the past, right? That we're going to could potentially vote to agree something that's going to cost more, that we're putting in our FY16 budget at a time when we don't know, are we going to have to cut some other things from our budget to close the gap?
So I'd love to respond to those points.
Go for it.
I don't have any answers to these.
The notion of the administrative oversight, it's not, these people are squarely, and Claire, it's near dear to your heart for sure, they're clearly, in the teacher's contract. It's true that the scope and sequence, as it were, of their responsibilities looks and maybe feels a little administrative. It's not. I mean, they're still department chairs, and they don't have administrative purview. That's not. Are they content area experts that contribute to the evaluation process? Yes. Is that what's best for kids? Yes. In terms of the budget, the position as constructed originally, in the original iteration of this budget has all of that in there. So there's nothing that gets layered on. You're right. But that's one thing we struggled with administratively, which is, and we've particularly heard from the region, which is, over the course of the past few years, which we so appreciate, which is, does this budget tell us, the school committee, everything you need to do instructionally? And we've struggled over the past few years because there's always been this, because not that finances are looking great these days, but certainly we were in a little different landscape. So we really felt like it was important to put in here with the instructional model that we'd like to garner support around. And if for some reason it falls out of here, it's okay. But at least we went to bat for the model that, we've heard that and we took that to heart in building this budget.
Right, and
Fair.
I'm not suggesting, Steve, that if we have to close the gap, this is something
Right.
we would say we want to give up. So I don't want anyone to have that impression. It's just,
It's a
if there's a
Yep.
gap to close, we have to figure out where that comes from.
Great point. Yeah, and that's absolutely.
Hang on one second. Any other questions up here? Okay, Mary, you had a question.
Yeah, I had just a factual question on this. Is the way that it's written up here, and this may be actually what it is that the department head 6 through 12 will replace the middle school coordinator. Is that correct? And has that coordinator position been taken out of the budget?
Yeah, that whole
Yes.
transaction's been netted out, so it's the curriculum supervisor level position comes out. Has come out, so that's all been netted out of the budget.
Okay. So there'll be no one in the middle school who is in charge of this, is that correct?
That's right, the person will oversee 6 through 12.
12. Okay.
Happy
And it could be in the
New Year,
middle
Mary.
school or
Right.
the high school.
Yes, they could be a faculty member of either building. It doesn't have to be someone.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I just, it didn't seem like the other
Had gone away.
had gone away. And I just wanted to make sure that
Fair
it
enough.
had.
We'll triple check it, Mary, but for sure it's a good point. And the other thing that Mary raises, which is good, sort of raises question there. Okay, so the fine arts department chair, this is good for the school committee to know, given that that's a K through 12 position, that arguably could be someone who comes from the elementary school. Absolutely. So remember, we're in one teacher's contract. That position's there. That would be an interesting and first ever for us, and something we're pretty excited about. Actually, looking at it could so that
But we do have some pay benefit quirkiness about a free district position.
Can you speak up a little bit, Claire?
I'm just saying, Kathy, we have a little bit of a quirkiness if someone's salary is allocated over the 3 districts and their benefits and seniority. So have we figured that out?
So,
irrespective of whether this person teaches or.
So you're saying if the person came from Pine Hill, it would be different than if it were a person from the region?
Right.
the person's still fundamentally assigned, more than 50%
Because
of
their
the person's
seniority,
assigned.
their seniority rests with the district in which they teach.
Yes.
So
lose their
seniority, is that what you're saying?
No.
No. So, I'm just noting, there are some quirky issues related.
They're still primarily a teacher in the building in which they teach.
They're still 80% teaching.
So if they were from the Pine Hill, the Pine Hill would continue to pick up that benefit.
So there is Sherborn or Pine Hill picking up that 80% or not 100%?
So what we did is this model has the cost of, it has the release time and the stipend is what gets apportioned to the districts. The teaching component would remain with the district of assignment. Yeah.
All right, so it's minimal impact on the town.
And you know, it's interesting, I had a conversation with several superintendents over the past few days, just in going through different budgets and whatnot. And in conversation, it's really interesting that a lot of superintendents are putting forward budgets where the instructional leaders, the department chairs at the high schools, they're really quite polar opposite from us. They're really more, 60, 80% release and supervisory time with 20-40%. And that's something that, but I mean, that's something that has definitely come up and we've wrestled with it. And certainly the department chairs at the high school have brought that up at different times. So we don't feel as if the 20%, we feel that that's actually not a huge luxury. But it's important to compartmentalize in terms of what other districts are doing.
Sorry, quick.
I have another question, just in terms of ripple effect of whoever is chosen for this, either of these, well, it would be primarily for the tech position. So that person, if it is not the current LFTA head, okay, let's assume it is not, since Judy assumed it was. So let's assume it's not. Now, what happens with the point 2? So is there a ripple effect there where we might actually end up needing to hire, supposing it's, I'll pick somebody who it can't be because he already is the department head and chair. Suppose Jim Baruti, okay, so supposing that were to be the thing. Now he would be dropping, say, a math course in order to do that. So what's the ultimate ripple effect there? Do we end up hiring someone at point 2 that we don't know about yet, or?
Mary, that's built in as point 2 release time. We have a figure in it.
No,
Right,
that's
but the physical.
the actual person may.
We change faculty all the time.
Well, if there's someone who can take it over. In other words, the person, say the person who has the department head chair doesn't get it, okay?
Right.
Now, that person has to pick up a point 2 from someone because they no longer have the release time, correct? And then supposing that that person isn't certified to teach.
Mary, this is why we have administrators.
No, I'm just asking about, I'm asking about the potential financial.
teacher
I'm talking about the money, I'm not talking about the qualifications.
But there wouldn't be, in this model, there wouldn't be a new spend of money.
There would not.
No.
There's no danger of someone having to be hired.
And we run like the different scenarios of people who have the certifications may be liable, so this committee won't see an introduction of new money for, whoops, this
Well,
resulted
and
in needing
if somebody who applied and was appointed and then for some reason had to leave the district, and you had to replace that and other things happened, you still have to do that within the confines of the FY16 budget.
Right.
So
Right.
that's the answer.
So no ripple effect.
No.
Yes, Kathy.
So I just want to say that, not to make any comment on all the wonderful things happening in any of these aspects of the curriculum. I totally understand how important they are. But listening to the conversation, I'm still not quite convinced, or I just don't quite understand why one position needs to be K-12. Why we need a K-12 fine arts and we don't need K-12 in other content areas. We're not talking about a K-12 in the engineering part of it. So I think that's a question, if I was to be asked, I really wouldn't know what it is about the fine arts. And again, I'm not saying it's not an important curriculum, it doesn't need to grow. But what about it makes it need to be a K-12 position when we don't have a lot of those in other parts of our system yet? And so I'm just kind of saying back that little piece of how this is coming forward it's not really clear to me how I would say the committee maybe was conceptualizing that or justifying that. So that's just kind of some feedback.
So not to be sort of cagey about my response, but it's a little bit evolutionary, and it's sort of, and I think what gave birth to this position in a way is the fact that there was a huge curricular effort behind this particular content within the fine arts spanning the past few years that really provided, I think, a lot of the foundational fortification behind this. I wouldn't presuppose, but I certainly wouldn't close out the discussion that futuristically we may not ask committees to say, it could be, for instance, it could be that in a few years we say, let's look at a 6 through 12 foreign language position because that makes sense. We have kids coming up from our elementary schools that now are a K-12 foreign language position. This, I think, is the first stage in what could be a new rebranding of instructional leadership for the school system. It just so happens to be the first area where a lot of curricular work has already happened, which is both visual and performing arts.
Yeah, it just seems like it would make more sense if it was 6-12, if they were both 6-12. I still don't get why the K-12, and it had nothing to do with all the important stuff happening at the elementary. I'm not making any comment. It's just on that piece of it, I totally get it. It's just that why that and why then not everything?
Yes, everything.
Well,
That's it.
then that's a
Yes,
larger
every-
conversation that I would hope this committee would be having as they
And-
talk
and-
about this position.
And Kathy, and we may, and, you know, it would be possible, I don't think we would be well advised, it would be possible to have that conversation this year about every department. But I think that would probably be too much, too fast, right? I think, I'm extremely excited about this as a model, also as the thing itself, because I think it's valuable to do. Yes, it would be valuable for history, and it would certainly be valuable for math and for English as well. But we have a situation in which this makes sense this year. And if it makes sense for other branches of academics in future years, I hope we'll see a push from the administration to consider that. You need to start somewhere, and this is where we're starting.
Let's not, because we have a whole lot of stuff we still have to cover, so really quickly, yeah.
Give like a 30-second, so, because I totally understand where Kathy is coming from, and I've struggled with this. The one thing I was thinking as we're talking and in response is, to me, the difference is that arts are optional. And so there's more of a need, I think, to create confluence from K through 12, but also to grab the kids and keep them interested early, because they have a much greater opportunity to opt out once they get to middle school or high school if it seems so vastly different from what they did in elementary. And that's why it's important that it be more coordinated, whereas a kid can't opt out of history, they can't opt out of English. So to me, that's why coordination K through 12 feels like it would have a greater impact than other subjects. And that's just off the top of my head in terms of how it might impact a kid's experience in the middle and high school.
All right, really short last word, because otherwise we're going to put short shift to all the rest of the budget.
I believe, Steve, when we were at the Sherborn school committee meeting, Dr. Brown was talking about, and it may be I'm hearing this from somewhere else, the fact that the art and the music teachers don't necessarily, or don't have sort of a peer group there. That everybody else has a peer group there but them, and that is part of what would be wonderful about having K through 12 instead of just 6 through 12, because it gives them curricular support and evaluation from a peer and someone in their field.
From a content expert.
Yeah, exactly.
No, we don't have to vote, it's just part of our, it's part of the budget.
No, it's a position in extra comp. You want to take a look?
If you see it as part of Appendix C, take a look.
Because you have a ratio.
Do we have to do that, do we want to do that now, or
Shouldn't we be doing that when we're all together as three committees and have the benefit of if it's a K-12 position, it seems like. Oh, is the.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
In January, yes.
All right. Well, if
Okay, I thought we were going to have a joint conversation, but I guess not.
the beauty of three committees. Well, if there is a desire to make a motion and vote on that today, I'm happy to do that.
Just out of curiosity, no, I was going to say, what happens if we vote yes and one of the others votes no, though?
It doesn't work.
Okay.
But we're on record as saying we were in support of it.
I was going to say, I just love this proposal. I cost-benefit analysis, I would get rid of other things in place of this. I think this is wonderful, having had kids go through both engineering and the fine arts aspect. I think they're desperately needed, and I think it's going to enhance these children's educations for years to come. And so I wholeheartedly would make a motion to support this.
Okay.
So please do.
Make a
All right, would you like
motion
to
to make a motion to support
cheat sheet for how to word this.
So I guess it would be
to accept
reorganization as described.
Appendix C.
extra comp appendix C of the teacher's contracts. The two positions, position 1 and position 2 is indicated on this
Memo.
and the date, and the ratio points as indicated.
In the allocation as proposed?
Allocation's fine.
Okay.
And the
What do you want to do as two separate votes in case the allocation changes? Does that matter? No? Okay. Then as allocated. All
so
right.
Amy, you can
Second.
just talk about
All right.
the whole proposal.
Is there any more discussion? No? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? All right, unanimous support.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for all your efforts.
Thank you, ladies.
All right, now we just have to balance the budget.
Leave you to your work.
Okay.
So while we're on a roll,
ACED number 4. All right.
ACED update number 4 comes out of the committee dated December 17th. This is part of, this is really no impact on the budget because this is essentially, in Appendix C of the educator's contract, there's a line and it reads mentor teachers. And it's interesting, every year we retain mentor teachers based on the hiring model for that particular year. So we happen to have an English teacher who's new at the high school and a social studies teacher new at the middle school. Those teachers are provided a mentor, the mentors are appointed, they're stipended at the cited ratio within Appendix C. What we envision for next year, given the staffing model, is not, this is a tandem transaction because we don't envision, and I guess the caveat is, those mentor teachers have historically been paid through a Title IIA grant. Title IIA is improving teacher quality. So while it's in the contract, the funding arm of that transaction falls from a federal grant. And that federal grant has not really fluctuated wildly over the past few years. It's been relatively stable. It's a grant that's appropriated by each of our 3 districts. Dr. LeDuc is working right now to see if we can amalgamate that and have those funds flow like we do for the Marmeco grant, for instance, flow into the region, because the region has the lion's share of the expenses for related to the MECO program. So we have funding, even if it's kept in the separate districts, we have a funding mechanism in each district, and we do not envision needing to use a lot of those grant funds next year because we don't envision a lot of turnover of teachers. Compartmentalize that. The flip side to that transaction is this is the next phase of our evaluation system. The next phase of the evaluation system calls for the evolution of what are called qualified peer observers. These are when you get to a certain position within the maturation of this evaluation system, you are on a trajectory as a teacher in our school system to elect to have what's called a QPO, qualified peer observer, which means if you're a math teacher at the middle school and you are duly credentialed, you can say, I would like Marcia Sorrell to be my QPO next year. If Marcia has been vetted and has taken the coursework required that we are requiring people to go through if they seek to be a QPO, then an educator can select a QPO from a qualified list. We have 23 teachers system-wide who've expressed interest. And the great part of this is that a teacher in the middle school could literally select a QPO from the high school, from one of the other districts. This is an across the school system enterprise. And so essentially we're looking to say if you have a QPO who's assigned to work with one educator, it would be worth 0.25 of a ratio. If the person works with 2 educators, it's 0.5 ratio, and if 3 educators, it's 0.75 a ratio. So the ratio does not change, the funding mechanism does not change, essentially the title changes and the scope of what the person does. We think it synthesizes well because in a mentor arrangement, you have an educator working with an educator. In our evaluation system for the QPO function, you have an educator working with an educator. So it seems to us and to ACED and to the admin cabinet like this is a natural marriage, and it actually follows, it syncs up nicely with our evaluation system. The net sum gains nothing to the budget because this comes from a grant. Michael?
So a person receiving a QPO person, is that somebody that after going through an evaluation is more on the struggling side? Is it completely unrelated to what,
Right
what score they received during their evaluation.
Right, so let's say you're a teacher at the high school. In order for you as an educator to be able to say, I would like to have a peer observe me, you actually need to be on a very solid performance footing to be able, because it's seen as a very liberal part of our evaluation system. You couldn't have a teacher evaluating an underperforming teacher, because you then have someone within the same bargaining unit who's potentially having an
So
influence.
this is in lieu of
Not in lieu, in addition.
In addition. So of the 6 observations, 3 of them could come from a qualified peer
Okay,
observer,
so it is
and
in
3
lieu of.
is. 3.
Partially, not
Yeah, but,
Yes.
okay, so it changes the mix of who they're getting input from.
Correct.
Rather than
Yeah.
every 2 years from the same set of administrative staff, is that a different way of looking at it?
It is, and when I had my weekly meeting today with Keith Kaplan, the union president, and he said, Steve, I'm gonna be honest, it's so helpful to be able to receive feedback from a colleague. It's so helpful, and it's something that actually we were asked by the DESE to showcase this part of our evaluation system. And then I don't know, Dr. Ludy, do you want to teach about the Teach to Lead?
The Teach to Lead is an innovative conference of educators coming together February 7th and 8th. And we were asked by Teachers 21 to put a proposal forward for our innovative idea of qualified peer observers, because they really feel as though that's something that others would like to hear about. So I wrote a proposal over the weekend.
Thank you.
So how did we come up with the ratios?
So the ratios, originally the ratios are driven by a mentor right now is 0.75, full-blown mentor. And we thought about it, ACD and the admin cabinet in collaboration with the DSEA through Keith Kaplan, and said, it's interesting, you could have a QPO who's working with 3 people, and substantially that person's workload and responsibility needs to be commensurate with that. So we said, we have a 0.75 ratio to work with. So it would be 0.25 if you work with 1 person, 0.5. So we didn't want to exceed the parameters of what we have within the grant and what's allowable by Appendix C. It's really a restructuring of the titling and responsibility. Richard?
If and when the grant goes away, how much money are we talking about?
In total, about $20,000 across, all 3 districts. It hasn't, that grant hasn't, it's been around forever. Title II.
Since when?
Forever.
That's a long time.
And it actually hasn't, in the 6 years, yes. Forever. I'm going to pay dearly for that.
So what action do you need from us on this?
So this, we would look
We also have to vote on
To
it.
add these positions.
I do have another question. And so what then happens to new teachers? Do they continue to get mentors?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So this,
There's enough money in that grant to be able to do this, fund it.
I just worry that it sounds like a great program, no question about it, but it has to go away at some point. And I haven't heard the part of the conversation that says, what do we do with our budget when the grant goes away? Maybe there's no different decision that we would make right now, but maybe there is. And I haven't sort of been able to figure out in my own mind what happens.
You know what's interesting about that, Richard, and it's extremely valid, is that there's actually nothing in the contract that says that mentor teachers are grant funded. It's, as it stands at this moment, they're in Appendix C, it's called mentor teachers, it's at a 0.75, and it's just through our good fortune that we've literally said, you know what, we have a grant, and it matches up, the grant criteria matches up with what we have in our contract. So there's nothing actually at the moment in the contract that would say, by the way, if the grant evaporates, switch you to these positions.
And there's nothing that says year to year, you're guaranteed to have that position.
That's correct.
Right. In the appendix.
That's right.
And so if the grant goes away and we have these,
We could, the discussion is say,
and say,
next year we
no,
don't have any
$0.
Well, we popped in the operating budget.
Well, or
Right.
not.
Or
It's up to you,
Okay.
up to the
That's what
committee at the
happens.
time.
extra comp committee would bring something to us, we'd have a discussion.
And the extra comp committee may say something else would need to go there. We think it's
Right.
important, we'd like to bring to the school committee that this, and this can go, because we really need this, and this.
So, Miss really kind of taking this off.
Okay, you know what,
Well,
then let's not.
Have we got at some point,
Michael,
could
it's
see-
8:30.
but at some point, could we see everything that's paid for via grants? Because I don't recollect ever seeing a schedule of that during the budgeting process. So, let's.
Probably not anymore.
Okay.
In our time, we've seen
Okay.
All right.
Do it
Actually, yes.
I'll make a motion to add QPO, 1 educator assigned 2 educators and assigns 3 educators with the ratios indicated in the memo, and to Appendix C of the teacher's contract.
Excellent. All right, second? All right. All right, any more discussion? No? All those in favor? Aye. All right. Excellent.
And thank you for the extra comp.
Yeah, boy, those guys are busy.
Thank you. It's a group of very dedicated teachers who come together to do enlightenment work.
Okay. Ah,
We can improve.
I was just
No, it's
saying,
like
I'm so
coffee.
sad not to be anymore.
What?
When did you thought she was on there?
Remember when I used to run it? I was just thinking, Claire, this sounds like, that's a lot of meetings.
you would have been
You could have been right.
an expert. Okay, on to the budget. Let's get an update on capital, shall we, first?
Sure. You want to provide an update on capital lawyer? Well, actually, I'll jump in on the IMA.
Yes,
We
perfect.
can do that. So this afternoon, do you have your IMA in your packet?
Yeah.
You do? Okay. Thank you. I made copies just in case. So after discussing this with Ms. White this morning, we sent this is, considered the red line version of the intermunicipal agreement to town administrators, David Williams and David Ramsey, both. And I simply indicated that tonight, this IMA, this red line version of the IMA would be before the regional school committee. The only change from last year's IMA to this IMA that's in your packet is literally the data that would change from year to year. So annual town meeting 14 becomes 15, and of course the amount of the capital. If you need it, I have plenty of copies.
No, it's attached.
Okay, that's fine. There you go.
It was also in the back of the
Does
audit.
anyone need it in the audience? No. So we're all set. So the intermunicipal agreement calls for, and again, this number remains at the 358 number was what was plugged in. And then the red line version, section 2, speaks to the capital allocation percentages for each of our member towns. We equate that out in terms of dollars. And then everything in terms of 2014 became 2015. And at the advice of bond counsel, there were only 2 additional changes, and that's last year's IMA in 2 instances didn't include the word member before the word town. So you'll notice that in paragraph section 3, there are 2 instances where we added the word member and town. So this version is before both boards of selectmen. And it was discussed at the December 18th Sherborn Board of Selectmen's meeting. And at the time, Selectman Durensis, who you'll recall had some concerns initially with the structure of the IMA, was pleased ostensibly to share with his fellow selectmen that the IMA worked. We didn't have nothing befell us as a the towns as a result of it. The only questions that were raised at the 12/18 Sherborn BOS meeting were raised by Chairman Jaimo, who asked the questions around cash flow and the timing of projects when the towns may be borrowing. And in response, when I talked to Ms. Tague about that, Ms. Tague has done a great job on many levels, but of staying in communication with the treasurers and the towns to make sure that when the projects are syncing up with the region, they're syncing up with when our towns, well, in this case, Sherborn, Dover didn't borrow. In that case, when Sherborn was going out to borrow for other projects. So that was handled administratively, and I provided responses to Mr. Jaimo's questions, and in response to I've already written back to him, and I'm not sure anyone knows differently. Mary, do you know of anything differently than that?
I do not know. That, I watched your whole meeting last night, and it didn't come up.
It didn't pop at all?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we need to vote on this at all, or just, we're, right? Okay.
Nope.
Okay.
They did raise, there's something in here about unused funds being returned to the town.
That was in the last one.
So at the end of this year, because this is the end of our first
Right.
year of one, I assume we'll have some kind of an accounting and discuss what goes.
We still have projects completing, that's why. There won't be any.
Section 5. Section 5, record.
Yes, it says record keeping. Do you have what you
Why wouldn't we get the
after they
Yeah. They,
Comes
the
back to us.
selectmen will provide us feedback, and then we may need to reconsider if there are any changes that they'd like made. But it was nice to hear Mr. Durensis and Mr. Crusoe say, you know, it worked. It worked. So I think we're in good plan.
We need to vote when we have a final
Number.
round.
Yes.
That's in terms of our capital request. That's what's most vital. And I don't know, Michael, do you want to jump into the lighting project? What do you want us to? Chris?
I just got an update right before I came to this meeting. We have a meeting scheduled on Friday with Northeast Energy.
Northern Energy.
Northern Energy, to go over the initial rebate offerings. Michael Leslie will be sitting in with us on that.
That was one
So
of the
we should have a number shortly, as far as, I think the number we plugged in was 158.
Well, no, we're down to 100.
100,
Something,
rather,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
So, but
104.
as they're having that meeting and collecting information, will there be sections that may have different saving rates relative to it? So we'll chunk it out into kind of groups, and then we'll work our way. Hopefully they all have a very reasonable payback, and we'll use the new electricity rate as our baseline.
Do either you or Lori have any desire to attend that meeting with Northern Energy on Friday?
I would go. I'm interested.
Okay.
Okay.
And what time is
It's
that?
at 11 o'clock.
Okay, I'll
It's
try.
in the middle school custodial office. That's over there.
But not really sent there, so.
You get to see where it all happens.
There you go. All right.
Thank you, Chris, for arranging
Oh,
that.
and on the well, we had about 18,000 of proposed or estimated costs for the actual drilling of it. Do we have any estimated costs now for the connecting it into the system and the controls?
Yeah. I'll have to check
Okay,
on that.
because my sense was that was gonna bring that number down as well.
Right.
Because we have a placeholder of 48, so
Right.
right now 30,000 of connecting it and trenching, and that seemed like a lot.
The placeholder is 40.
Oh, so 40, we did, we took 8 after that.
Yeah.
Good. Awesome. Okay. Anything else on capital? All right. So, digging into the operating, what I'd love to do is, I think I'd sent you guys my thoughts on process a little bit ago. What I think everyone has received the document that starts with the changes in red, which basically mean that the bottom line for the operating budget has not changed at this point, but there's been some reallocation of some of the buckets. And then behind it is a revised list of talking points where the changes are in red, and those red points either are further clarification of discussion that's already happened or direct answers to questions that were submitted by either one of us or by one of the finance committees before December 20th, so that they had a chance to get some of these answers on paper before our meeting tonight. So what I thought would make sense is we'll have Steve go through and do the high-level changes, the ones that are part of this overview, because if there's any specific questions, especially from the finance committee, if you need clarification or further information on that point, or obviously anyone up here. Let's discuss those. And then let's just jump into the operating budget and basically go function code by function code to make sure that all the big questions are answered. My goal would be at the end of this time that we've gotten to a pretty good understanding of where we are. That might not mean we're at resolution, but at least we know what the issues are. And if there's a big issue like longevity, which I'm sure will be an issue, I'd like to put it kind of in a parking lot, get through all the budget, and then circle back on big issues so that we don't get rat-holed down on one thing and give short shift to everything else on it. So that's what I'm thinking for the process. All right.
Thank you.
Having said that.
Thank you, Ms. White, and thank you to members of the school committee, Sherman Advisory Dover-Warren for the questions ahead of time. We administratively, the admin cabinet put a lot of time before the holidays in trying to really put together some substantive responses to the questions, so we'll dive in. Are we all on the changes page?
Yes,
We're looking
we are.
at highlights in red at the bottom of the first page. So this particular comment, despite the enrollment for the 2015-16 school year being relatively flat in relation to the 14-15 school year, concerns have been raised around class sizes for high school. The high school has absorbed, and this is just a note that we'll get to further on, but we've absorbed actually a 10% surge in the past 5 years in our enrollment, while adding no new teaching positions and only increasing the Chinese position by 0.2. So when we think back to actual FTEs, full-blown FTEs that have been added to the region, not happened over the past few years despite the 10% surge in the enrollment or increased enrollment. Top of page 2, bullet point 7, item 7. At this time, we have no confirmed retirements for the 15-16 school year, so I don't have in writing for any teachers yet in terms of retirements. I expect that if we have any, they'll be forthcoming in the next 3 weeks because they have to. Skipping down to item 9. And this concerned the 9C cuts, and the question was raised by our member towns whether we anticipate being affected by any 9C cuts. We speak to the MECO issue, and earlier I spoke to the fact that we hope this week to know more about any impact from 9C cuts in terms of most imminently regional transportation would be the one that we're really keeping our eye on the prize around that. So we will let the regional school committee know just as soon as we know, and then I'm sure that Ms. White would let the towns know, would let Sherman Advisory and Dover-Warren know.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Item 13 concerns the Sherborn budget. This point speaks to the 1.5% that was allowable by the guidance provided by Sherman Advisory, and the Sherborn School Committee recently had a change in its fiscal 16 budget, which added something back into its operating budget. So essentially what this does is it captures the fact that the Sherborn, the Pine Hill operating budget for fiscal 16 is slightly modified from what it was initially. So we want to be, in the interest of full disclosure, disclose that. Item 14, while it is true that the region has closed its fiscal budgets with an average of $500,000 surplus, and I think the regional school committee members know this, that has literally been what has contributed to our E&D composition that we then use to finance the next year's budget. So that was a question that was asked around that. Item 17 concerns the bond refunding, and we talked about that just a few minutes ago. So you've taken a vote around that. We'll know what the savings are after that transaction takes place. February. Mary?
Yeah, I actually just had a question about that because, talking point 13 seems to indicate the bond reissue has already been taken into account in the budget, but on that, I call it the colorful sheet, the one there, it says that it does not factor in reduction in capital assessment. So
We have not factored in the realized
The
savings.
existing debt service.
So that will eventually come off that number, even though this seems, the point 13 seems to, or am I just misreading?
But it will also come off the town's revenue numbers too, because we're reducing the amount of excluded debt. And so it's a savings, but it's a savings directly to the tax bill of it goes directly to the tax bills.
And so there's no It won't come off our debt service?
Yes,
No,
it
it
will.
comes off our debt service, but then on your revenues
Right,
and Dover's revenues,
right.
it also
So
disappears.
it just cancels?
Yeah.
Okay. So 13,
Wait, what 13? 13's about
Are you looking
now.
at the right set
I'm
of?
probably not, I'm sorry.
Okay.
17, I'm sorry.
Okay.
17.
Yeah, so,
So we were careful to say everything's estimated at this point,
right.
we don't know
But
anything.
I guess I read anticipates favorable action, and I thought that meant that the number,
Oh, no,
Was-
anticipating their action around a vote. Because if you remember last month, we didn't really know.
okay, okay.
I didn't want to presuppose their vote.
All right.
you know.
So there's no change in the number.
Right, and then item 18 will be changed, it's not highlighted in red, but to reflect Mr. Merrill's point that, so I draw your attention to 18, that will be converted to red tomorrow to indicate that it's a change to read annual cost. And does that reflect your point, Mr. Merrill?
Yeah, and it also dovetails with the actual verbiage in the audited financial report.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. So, thank you.
That's right.
Thank
Good
you.
catch.
All
All right, so those are the general comments. Okay.
Yes. So those are the general, now we get into the function codes.
Before we do that, are there any high-level questions at this point, based on what we've gone through? Okay. All right. I know this might seem a little tedious, but I think that it's probably the most logical way to do it. So we'll basically go through, Steve's going to read if there's a major bullet point, or if I happen to know that Ms. Tague changed, or that there's a key comment that we want to make sure we highlight, and we'll just keep going through the function codes. So if you have a question that I haven't heard, just raise your hand.
You're going through the budget itself?
Yes, we are, by function code,
Against the talking
against the
points
talking
area.
points.
Okay.
Okay, so school committee.
So there was an item raised around the business manager around salary and why was there an increase related to that. Ms. Tague's impending retirement occurs during the summer. We will therefore have at least 3, maybe even 4 payroll periods where we hope to have the new business manager installed in position, and we'll be carrying double payroll for a business manager for a few pay cycles. So that was, I'm just speaking to the red points that were raised.
Right.
So Steve, are you able to tell us what number that is put into the budget for that transitional cost? Because the Dover, 10,000. Because the Dover committee is trying to make a list of new or just
Yep.
new costs and
Okay.
such, so that we can just kind of reflect that. So 10,000. Thank you.
10,000. Okay.
So I'm going to move to the superintendent's function code. So I'm going to read from the red point 2. The region's FY16 budget changes page, typically presented January 6th, reflects the reclassification of $32,500 from the superintendent's reserve to the facilities reserve. So that's a movement of $32,500. This reclassification stems from the fact that the majority of our expenses historically charged against the line have been in the nature of the facilities reserve. So we're moving the $32,500, suggesting that that be moved into the facilities reserve line because that's ultimately where those expenses are typically borne.
If you look at the history under facilities reserve, you'll see it.
What it gets used for.
And in my first meeting with Ralph, there was also a desire that some of the smaller things, like below 10,000 or so, we just absorb and we not even put through the whole capital listing process and all that were coming out of that on-site and site report.
Then there was a question.
It's not going to, so in other words, remember, this doesn't change. This stays static the whole time. Until the final one. You won't see 32.5 come out of.
But what line item?
The one that's 62.5 will go down to 30.
So you haven't made this.
They don't get made until the very end. I learned that today.
If on this summary though, if you want to try to.
So are you going to come back to this sheet at the end?
Yes.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect.
That's good.
Yep.
Okay.
So, and then the next, there was a question asked under the same function code around superintendent's reserve. What do we use that? What's that used for? The account is a reserve, similar in origin and purpose as to why a city or town maintains a reserve. By way of example, the account has been used to cover unexpected leaves of absence, not able to be covered by other lines. for the Budget Sense upgrade to cover unexpected maintenance issues, for commissioning the Advocate food service report last year, you'll recall, and for recently approved technology infrastructure enhancements to the regional campus providing exterior building Wi-Fi.
Right. So that answers one of Dover's questions, which was what did we do anything with that discussion on the cell tower? And it's already been in FY15, which is why you're not seeing it in 16. So we used superintendent reserve this year to make that happen.
Okay, great.
So next, function code, district-wide information management and technology. I'm reading.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Before I get there? So business office secretary salaries and admin assistant salaries are up 2.8 and 2.4.
Longevity.
Is that? I saw you had noted that earlier,
Yeah.
but I wasn't sure. I just wanted to double check.
The next function, district-wide information management and technology. The changes page should read, this proposed budget should have read a $40,000 placeholder for the acquisition of a new food service management system. The school committee will recall that the recently commissioned food service study included a number of issues related to the system used to manage the operational planning and financial aspects of the food service program. As the current management system is not Windows supported and experiences many issues, we contend that a system overhaul is in order. This overhaul and the move to a web-based system allows for better financial modeling, inventory control, reporting free and reduced lunch reporting, and menu analysis. The region's share of the cost of the system is estimated at $20,000 for that system. That $20,000 is illustrated in the cover sheet that Chris
And we'll go into one of
and we're
these
going to go
boxes.
back to that
Yeah.
and show that.
So that $40,000 is already in the budget as printed.
It's been, 20,000 is the region's piece. 20,000 is the region's piece, and it was not in the budget, Kathy. What we've done is we've reclassified $20,000 worth of other expenses. That cover sheet shows $78,500, I think, is the total, or something like that, coming in and out. So there's no new spending.
Right.
It's literally, okay, we recognize the food service sub-POS system is
That
needed.
should have been in there.
We realigned. Yep.
So you said that there's a $40,000 placeholder.
Right, across the district,
Across
all
the
three
three
districts, of which
Yeah.
20
And
is
does,
ours.
well, I know this isn't the local thing,
The-
but it,
Is
Pine
Pine
Hill-
Hills 10?
Pine Hill will show that, but
change.
we're approaching this exercise with the same idea of trying to
right.
make sure that we find that somewhere else.
Okay, but it's not there yet.
No.
Okay.
Bingo. Yep. And then in the same function code, this proposed budget reflects a 0.2 FTE increase in the region's share of the 1.0 FTE system-wide technology integrator teacher. The person in position is scheduled to begin serving as a backup to the data manager and is also serving as our system-wide webmaster. So it's appropriate for her allocation to be changed. So that is the position of Diane Papathopoulos. I mean, that's, so one of our glaring issues at the region is that our data webmaster and data manager she's been doing the webmaster work, and the data manager role is filled by one person with no backup, no dual controls are in place. So this actually allows Diane to fill that function, critical function.
This is a net zero from a
Net
K-12
zero.
perspective.
Yep, exactly, net zero transactions.
But it will come out of the local budgets.
It came out of Dover's, Chickering's budget,
Okay.
and Chickering now will not own or have a piece of Diane Papathopoulos working there. So that piece came out of Dover and is introduced to the region.
Okay, and why not Sherborn?
Because Sherborn actually is already deficient in terms of the school, in terms of its support in the area of technology integration, and Chickering has more FTE counts in that area to support that building.
Okay, so Diane stays at Sherborn now, and that budget.
She stays at, a portion of her stays in Pine Hill,
Right, that's what
and
I'm
then the
saying.
lion's share of her stays at the region.
Right.
Yep.
So there's no change to the Sherborn budget because of this waiver center.
Right, yep.
All right, function code.
Curriculum leadership department heads.
Before we get to the department heads, sorry, I know Dover had asked a question about they were applauding you on not printing the student handbook and wondering if there are other things that would no longer be printed that might save more money. So they're all for not printing
Anything
things.
we can save on?
You don't have to answer that right
Yeah,
now, but
so-
any more that you cannot print would be good for all of
Yeah,
us.
we
I think.
primarily, we make, I think, about 15 copies of this.
Awesome.
And then student handbook is not, it's all online.
Great.
Well, the data
It's all online. Right, great. So the more that you don't
Yep,
print,
yep,
we're happy.
Constantly look at that.
We
Yep.
try not to print, except budgets.
Except for
I have nothing to share or report on in terms of a change with respect to curriculum leadership department heads. There are no change talking points
Good.
in that function code. Teachers classroom, we have a lot to say.
Yep. Which is good because
Isn't
they're
that
our biggest asset.
Item 2, a question was posed as to the teaching capacity of immediate teachers at the high school. And thanks for asking the question, it's good. The teacher's schedule calls for 80% teaching and 20% AV support. This teacher actually used to teach 40%, and administration has assigned him additional teaching sections over the past few years so that we actually were able to roll out additional sections of electives to no effect on the budget.
Great.
So we were able to keep electives running, roll out additional sections of electives, not have those class sizes go up in existing electives by redeploying his responsibilities.
And those classes are fully subscribed.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of large class sizes, the next point.
Yep. This proposed budget reflects the addition of 1.0 FTE teacher at the high school. This position is needed to respond to increasing class sizes, particularly in areas of math and science. As a result, this one proposed position is slated to be a combination of math science teacher. It should be noted that the high school has not requested additional teaching staff at all in recent years, despite a steady increase in student population. This proposed position, assigned a prospective salary of $70,040, is included in the overall $264,880 or 5.9% high school teacher salary line increase. Mr. Smith then went into great detail, thank you very much, in providing a little bit of backup as to why math and science, this is a leveling exercise to make sure that we are able to offer the same number of sections in math and science as we do in the humanities. I won't read all of that, but thank you, Mr. Smith. I know it took you some time.
That was extremely helpful.
Yeah, very helpful. Thank you for the detail.
Number 5, the high school teacher salary line. This is not a new position. Rather, the region has for several years been charged for 10% of our system-wide ELL teacher director. And we need to charge 20% of that educator to the region, I'm on talking point 5, as she is providing greater direct service and programmatic oversight to regional age students. It is disproportionate to reflect only 10% of this position to the region for the 15-16 school year. So the ELL instruction is really a moving target. To be cost conscious, we have one ELL teacher director, and legally we're able to provide services to students who are ELLs, English language learners, with tutors underneath that person to provide services for students. So we have one person who is the teacher director for all 3 districts, and she needs to shift depending on where some of the ELL needs are. So it so happens we need more of that person at the region. And we go into great detail. We actually provided the counts of our ELL students, but we caution you that it's not a direct correlation, because you can have 3 ELL students who require 3 hours of direct service daily. So we provide all that backup. I won't read all of it, but I know it was requested.
Is there going to be a change to the local budget because of that then?
Whatever's already been reflected, it was already captured in the first iteration, Mary, because what we did is that came out, but then we needed to fortify those budgets with some additional tutoring hours. So that became, for the counts at the elementaries.
Okay, so no change.
No change on that front.
Since the next issue, longevity, is a big one, can we get through everything else and come back to longevity?
Sure.
So that we keep the momentum going? All right. I had one more thing on teachers, and it's to the request earlier when we were talking about grants, that the line in here that says a .2 FTE math teacher previously funded through a Title I grant. I mean, I think in general it'd be nice to know what grants we're getting and what they fund. So just more, I think that was another Dover question.
So we actually provide every year, we publish, and it came out of Karen's office, I think earlier this year, we provide what's called a grant table, and it's made available, and it outlines every grant that we receive and a descriptor of the grant and how much it was and whether it went up or down from fiscal year to fiscal year.
Great.
So we actually have that ready to go. That comes out, comes out of the assistant superintendent.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions on teachers? Questions? All right, teacher specialists.
Teacher specialists. I'm going to item 2. This proposed budget reflects the migration of the cost of the orientation and mobility instructor to the middle school. These costs were historically in the Chickering operating budget. That question was asked. So that was a movement of funds from the local budget to region because of migration of the student population. Item 3, this proposed budget reflects the acquisition of $13,643 in specialized equipment specific to middle school students' needs. These costs were historically in the Chickering operating budget. The question was asked as to what steps the district takes to exhaust all options related to having one's health insurance cover the cost of specialized equipment related to activities of daily living, as opposed to equipment of a curricular academic nature. And we go into an explanation that we pursue all opportunities we can to the best of our ability.
And just so you know, that line's actually in line 2420, instructional equipment. I actually found it. It's not in this block because I was looking for it. It comes in a later page. If you want to be really anal, like I clearly I'm getting to know this budget. More than I thought I would.
Which section?
Yeah, I did. 2420, instructional equipment. It's on page, yeah, top of the 4th page. Right, yeah. 2420. Oh, instructional equipment, sorry. But great explanation, I think.
So those last 2 things that you just explained, would they be appropriately classified as
new
costs? Yeah, I know they're new, but are they costs associated to a child with special needs?
Children
with special needs? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're not really new though.
It's just new to the region.
No, I agree. That's exactly what I want to be able to explain when asked.
Yep.
Right.
Under function code educational assistance, we begin with a change, well not a change, but note, other than to meet the needs of a particular student's IEP calling for a one-to-one educational assistant, no new EAs have been hired for the past several years. We have done our best to meet students' needs without any new hiring, but the number and complexity of cases warranted a review of that for fiscal 16. Over the past several months, the Director of Special Education has worked with the special educators and with the team chairs at the middle school and high school to better define the language-based program. In the course of doing so, the team developed a profile for a student, and that's not for an individual student, it means for globally, for students in need of language-based support. Those students now comprise a cohort being serviced by the language-based specialist teacher or educator. What we have also found is that it is increasingly difficult, nearly impossible, for the language-based teacher to provide direct services and to confer with educators in order to build capacity for classroom teachers to meet students' needs in a response to intervention Tier 2 schema. As a result, the proposed fiscal 16 budget includes 2 EAs, those are new, one for the high school and one for the middle school to provide direct services for students consistent with IEPs. Those are new. Under library media, I have nothing to change or speak on.
By the way, the contracted services were, what's Destiny program? Library management system.
Yeah. Under professional development, the evaluation committee carefully considered the criteria. This talks about the QPO. We just talked about that with the update 4. The course that we require educators to go through to become a qualified peer observer, that Karen did a lot of homework around, has a cost associated to that particular course, and that's why that line has gone up, that PD line went up.
Can I ask a question about that? So back when I was on the teacher's contract negotiating group, which was eons ago, I thought there was some stipends that teachers got for professional development anyway every year.
You mean course reimbursement?
Right.
Okay. So is that money that could be used for this course, or is that?
It could be. It could be. So what we'll have to do is, for the educators who want to be a QPO, definitely the option will be to be able to use, they have contractually $400 annually. So if the educator has not used his or her $400 otherwise, We have, and we do that on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
We literally will ask teachers, you know, can we use your $400 allocation towards this particular course? And if the teacher hasn't already used it, we've never had someone say no. They're always like, of course, you know, use that, and then we're able to. So this is like a fully loaded model of what it will cost to run the course. We won't really know until we do all the registrations as to whether or not someone's willing to use the $400. Their $400 can be used for some other course teachers want for it. Could be.
And it's the teacher's option, not the administrator's option.
Yeah. But the teachers have been so extraordinary about that they've said, sure, I'm not using my $400, please use that, recognizing that that would typically free up PD money for other.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
which is exactly the spirit. But
When will that be known?
We have to keep the money within the budget. We really won't know that until the second half of the year. We have to fill it from it.
Right.
Yeah.
We never take the course, yeah.
But
No, this is for the course.
Right, but
You can't adjust.
Until the people decide for that.
Yeah, it'll be
When
in the
you
middle of the
tally
year
up
when they
turn
know
backs
that.
for everything else.
Right.
No sooner.
So would you think this $12,000 additional funds to get this going is a 1 year cost that
We have quite a group of people that will be trained as QPOs. The other piece of the evaluation system that we have to take into consideration is, and it's built into the legislation, requires us to adopt a survey instrument. This is part of the evaluation system. So we're right now looking at different survey instruments that can be used with educators. And what we've learned is that there's a modest cost associated with that. So what we think will happen, Kathy, is that this line, course-wise, will probably come down, but we have nowhere else in the budget to capture the cost of the feedback tool that we need to adopt. So we remain very hopeful that the course line will deflate naturally, and that will provide us enough room to be able to cover the survey instrument that we have to adopt. And that's usually, it's like $30 per, I think it's per educator in the school district. So even if the course line comes down, we have to build in a cost for the feedback, and Richard's on that committee
Okay.
for the
Thank you.
evaluation. So
It's cheap.
it is, it's not bad. So we're hoping to get a twofer out of that line, one way or another.
Got it.
Under classroom technology, I won't read all of that, but there was a request to better understand what the respective $41,000 is spent on. This supports, the hardware replacement campaign in both middle school and high school. And Anthony Rattaco provided a little bit of detail there on exactly what's being replaced and why.
This might be really picky, but can you just make sure, it also references replacement of the overhead projectors in the library and instructional material. I just want to make sure we're not double counting our overhead projectors. But it's not both in the technology supplement and in the library AV, because both the high school and the middle school AV equipment line has a replacement cycle for 5 classrooms at $1,500 per projector. So I just want to make sure that, and we might need to replace more than that. Those really are 2 different projects, but let's just make sure that.
And then under guidance counselors, I do not have any changes to that.
So would these have been projectors that might have been originally funded by DSCF or something
Well,
like
they're
that?
part of the construction when the building was put, when it was renovated, or they might have been DSCF along the way.
I'm just-
Yeah.
So some of these things that
Been here
come
a long
in.
time. Yes.
Okay, but they also are often funded initially with
Right.
a grant.
And then we have to replace them.
Yeah.
Correct.
Keep in mind, DSCF has done a complete departure.
Absolutely.
No, I know, it's just-
Absolutely.
Guidance counselors, I had nothing to change, nothing to report.
We had one question
Sure.
there. I thought it fell under there. It had to do with understanding the supplemental tutoring
Yeah.
item.
That's for home-based, home and hospital. Based on the actuals, that's been underfunded.
So Kathy, that's, if we receive a doctor's note, that's not special ed specific either.
Yeah.
It could be any student who may come out of a hospitalization, or who may, for one reason or another, we have documentation from a physician, the child be out of school for more than 14, 15 school days. We are legally required to enact a tutor, so as not to interrupt. And we have blown those lines out over the past few years, which is unfortunate on multiple levels, the least of which being financially, more because students' needs have warranted needing to put that tutoring in place.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The line, it's one of them.
Contracted service.
Yes, tutor contracted services. Exactly. It's not a huge number, it's just a huge percentage.
Okay, let's see what we got this week. Here, under transportation services, we had a note, since the budget was developed, we've learned more information about the specifics likely underlying the new transportation contract, thereby allowing us to reduce this line by $16,000. So when we go back to that changes page, as we affectionately call it, you'll see the budget drop by $16,000, and then you'll see a scoop on the other side, because that $16,000 helped to finance something else like the food service, POS, or whatever. We'll come back to it. The transportation RFP is out right now. Chris did a good job authoring that over the vacation, and so we're out to market on our transportation contract.
Thank you, Chris.
I was just going to ask how your start time study may affect the transportation contract. Is that going to change?
So we built in language in the RFP that allows us to add and subtract buses as our needs may warrant, and that's something that really historically wasn't carefully embedded in the previous RFP. So we have language that's been engineered into the RFP if we ultimately were moved to something that would allow us to say, if we need fewer buses at the elementaries or more buses at the whatever it is, there's a mechanism in there to allow us to do that. We did carefully look at the number of buses that we think we need, particularly at the elementary schools. You'll hear more about this at the Chickering, Dover, and Pine Hill school committee meetings, because we know we can reduce buses at the elementary schools. And we've worked that in a cost-conscious manner.
So that's already captured in the 16,000? That was my question.
No.
That you'll see on the, that you'll see when we look at the Dover and those lines, because those lines also in those budgets will come down. Transportation will come down.
Okay. Oh, so the 16 is just the region?
Just the region's share.
Okay. And there's no buses going away at the region?
No. But we're also not adding dairy. We're also not adding more.
Right.
We don't think. Athletics, the 10.9% or $25,911 increase in athletic coaches is attributable to 3 factors, and we've explained them. So in here, part of that is the 1.6% ratio increase. Remember that the ratio assignment goes up each year. The second is the school committee, the 6 assistant coaching positions that got rolled in. So we tried to break that out. And the other was the full adoption of indoor track for next year. And
Which they're now calling winter track.
Oh, really?
It's not actually indoor.
Because I was like, really?
Because they practice outside.
It's like Nordic running. So we went back to the May 7th, 2013 RSC minutes, and we provided you with information there to back that up.
Yep.
Okay. And there is an increase built in because when we were notified about the athletic director change, we've done a survey of athletic director salaries in the area, so I wouldn't want to compromise my negotiating position with the person who will be named for the position, but there was a need to make sure that there was enough to attract a competitive candidate. I am not necessarily pledging that will be spent because I want to make, Other student activities. This proposed budget reflects $10,000 increase in the high school activities advisors line. The regional school committee will recall that the fiscal 15 budget was built without a fully loaded extracurricular model, and that's why a few months ago you voted to spend the additional $9,200 so that all those positions were loaded. And we're just trying to make sure the fiscal 16 budget is in fact fully loaded. So you took action recently to fully load this year's. We need to make sure that bless you, that Appendix C is fully fundable for fiscal 16.
So does that give John and Scott the opportunity to run clubs and activities next year that aren't currently funded?
That's always a possibility, yeah. But we also tuck that money into the high school advisors line as opposed to kind of splitting up between middle school and high school. So it also doesn't presuppose that it's only for the high school.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Back to athletics, is there a compensating expected increase in fees? And what's the offset to the 49,000 increase?
I think it'll be pretty steady. We had 1,000 roster spots this year. I can't imagine it's going to go up materially. I think it'll probably plateau with the size of the classes for a while.
Yeah, because it's roughly the same number of kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There's not a huge fluctuation.
On the other student activities, is there a list somewhere of what student activities and the appendix
C?
Which of those positions actually are funded? When you look at the contract, there's a whole list of things that apparently could be funded, but there's no indication, I don't think, of what actually is funded.
We keep a running spreadsheet. So I mean, I could include it.
That'd be helpful to us.
We can include in the regional school committee.
Yeah, the list.
The list.
The list.
Yep.
Of what's being offered. Or what's being
funded this year.
Funded
or will be funded. Well, when is the decision made for the following year?
In the fall, right?
In the fall.
Yeah, and now it's
When the
somewhat
committee-
fluid. As you've seen these ACED updates, these are like, this is the ebb and flow of this Appendix C now. Is that accurate?
Because Mary, we can know, in the past, it was very difficult to change things on Appendix C, and so in the new contract, there's the ability for that extra compensatory committee to meet and make changes almost at will. So if come this time of year, the headmaster decides, oh, we need another activity, and to find some money to support it, that can be added to it. So it's a very fluid list. But John, you post.
But is there
you post positions in late spring.
Late
June
spring for the fall school year and everything.
For clubs.
So how is the determination for the lump sum made for the following year?
So how
did you get to 10,000?
We roll it through, we assume every position in 15 is going to be funded in 16. Now, it could change as a result of meetings with the agency, ED, but there's no way of us knowing that.
So if you were to take Appendix C, fully loaded Appendix C, takes Appendix C, every ratio for everything that's listed there, Mary,
right,
out by the ratio dollar amount for next year,
right,
and that's how you arrive at that the full Monty. The full amount.
So everything there has a place in the budget? You're
It
saying?
does.
Yes.
And that's correct. This makes that possible.
Yes.
This new thing would
This
make
new,
it
the
possible.
new 10.
Correct.
That's what you're trying to do.
It's
Correct.
not to say, though, that mock trial advisor list will necessarily run. It could be something else, but the spend will stay within the parameters unless there's a request before the school committee for more money.
Okay, let's keep going because we're at 9.
So, well, I have a further question.
Okay.
So like the department heads are listed at, they're in there, right?
Yes.
And so they're listed at, but we don't know how many department heads, those things that, I'm just trying to get a picture of the whole, I mean, it's more than 10,000, well, this 10 that is just bringing it up to whatever, but can we get a picture of what's the total amount of money there?
It's like $500,000 in total.
Oh, yeah. With athletics
Between
included.
coaches and...
All right, well, can we get a statement of that?
Yeah, I think the spreadsheet, let's include the spreadsheet, Mary, and see if that answers it.
Okay.
Is that, if that,
Yeah.
put in the meeting packet?
Yep.
It's a total.
It's a full run of it.
Yeah.
Steve, if I may, we also typically for extracurriculars, there's usually in a given year, maybe one, maybe two spots that isn't filled, but primarily everything is filled.
Okay.
Just as a rough idea. Obviously, all of our department chairs,
Right.
you might have a given year where something doesn't get filled. One of the spots where we sometimes, it takes a little bit longer to determine is incoming freshman class advisor, because that's a whole new group, and but in the 2 years I've been here, we've had one position that wasn't filled within that Appendix C listing. So it's not very many.
Okay. Well, people have asked.
Yeah, no, it's a good question.
How much money is actually being spent here? How much is
$500,000,
allocated?
very accurate.
Peter will
That's inclusive
Peter will
of
know
all
that
that.
from Peter will know that from contract.
Peter Caruso. Under custodial services, bullet point 2, this proposed budget level funds the plan and facilities reserve fund at $86,490. With the proposed January 6th budget changes, administration suggests that the $32,500 from the superintendent's reserve be reclassed into facilities reserve. So we tried to tie out all these talking points one by one. Item 5, the question was posed regarding substitutes for custodians. To clarify, we budget for what's called run coverage for when custodians are out. This enables us to ensure that facilities are clean. We are staffed in this area, but it is not as if someone can do his or her job and that of another custodian without incurring some form of coverage cost. So someone will have run coverage, which is essentially like an overtime issue to make sure that bathrooms are clean, trash is empty, and whatnot. Under utilities, this request remains in place as a decision concerning a second well has not been made. So that one line around the use for Medfield water supplement, it could come down if ultimately we move in the direction of the second well.
Just to be clear, that number, when the well's in place for a full fiscal year, would go to 0.
No, we still have Medfield water.
Why?
They provide water to the,
Yeah, but this was only for the overdemand.
no, but that line item.
That line
is
is
the entire water bill for the district.
So any
The well
potable
is-
water that goes into the school comes from Medfield.
Right.
Our wells are used exclusively to irrigate.
And the,
It may or may not be potable.
Fire.
Yeah.
But it's fair to say that that would come down by $3,400 if the second well doesn't play. That's the point.
Well,
Yeah.
No, more than that.
Right.
In the schedules you've provided in the past?
Right. That's what I'm thinking.
Well, let's get that
Offline.
sorted
We have
out.
$3,400.
Offline.
Retirement contribution. This question was asked as to whether the increase is attributable to adding staff or to a base rate increase. In response, the increase is primarily related to an actuarial study conducted by Norfolk County Retirement. The increase is actually 30%. However, the board voted to spread the increase over 3 fiscal years. The increase captures the investment losses as a result of the economic downturn. Chris, do you want to highlight on that at all? Any questions?
basically, it was an update to the previous actuarial study that hadn't been done, which didn't capture what happened over the past few years with the economic downturn. I think it's more attributable to that than it would be staffing at this stage.
Under insurance for insurance employees, bullet point 1, we contributed $25,000 to, this concerns the unemployment fund. We contributed $25,000 to the fund in fiscal year 15 and experienced claims history over the past 2 years, giving rise to the need for a modest contribution of $5,000 to that fund for next year. We currently have active claims that will reduce the fund balance markedly this year. We do have unemployment claims.
I had a question that I don't know if it's actually there because it's not, I'm not sure where I come up with it, because it's not listed on these talking points, but somewhere in the budget, I noticed there was a huge increase in workman's comp from 13-14 to 15 and 16. I just wondered about that. I hadn't seen, I just saw it yesterday or the day before.
You're looking at actual versus budget. Budget to budget, there's been no increase.
But going
Budget
between,
stays
but
the
this
same,
did
but
catch
the
my attention.
Between 13, 14, and 15, 16.
Right, it went up from 56,000 and 99,000.
That's what's going on. The budget stayed the same.
But this is the first time we see actually what we spent in FY14.
Right.
And then it becomes very noticeable that we're now at a much higher baseline, and it caught my attention.
What happens is we get the information, we provide them with our payroll, and it's a year behind.
Okay.
So they're giving us an estimate at the time, and we actually don't get the bill until the end of the year. And if our experience is positive, then they give us a credit. So it's one of those where we're getting a premium based on our experience, but if our experience is below that so-called, what they based it on for setting the premium, we do get a credit.
Okay, so you're saying that we have to pay the premium, and then, so the 99 is what they charge us?
Correct.
Okay.
And then other insurance group and liability, a question was posed with respect to pending litigation. The matters giving rise to this line remain active, and we are not prepared to release this contingency related to this particular line. We monitor the cases related to this with MIIA and keep school committee leadership informed on any and all developments. So we have some pending litigation that school committee leadership is aware of, but we can't release that particular line yet.
The very last page. This one. It's right here.
So now we're on the front page?
Management longevity.
Thanks.
Back to the change page.
Wake us up. Oh, here.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, to the change page.
Okay, so on the change page, so this is your little landscape page here. Budget adjustments presented tonight, January 6th. You'll notice superintendent's reserve line, much discussed, came down 32.5. Transportation came down 16. And we haven't really talked about this, but the longevity or retirement line, we're proposing, remember, that was budgeted at your initial one on December 2nd, that was budgeted $50,000. It was 10 teachers taking $5,000 retirement incentive. $50,000 model. We're saying, let's scale that back to $30,000. That leaves 4 placeholders for $5,000 each, potentially, for next year. 4 people could retire. That's probably not completely unrealistic, actually, for next year. And down below then, on the facilities reserve, that same 32.5 that came out of superintendent's reserve flows into facilities, that's a net zero. District technology salary other, that's the addition of the .2 technology integrator teacher we talked about, Diane Papafatopoulos. That's a piece of that person. Activity advisors, we just talked about, is the $10,000 for the Appendix C model. And district technology software is the piece around the food service point of POS information management system. So $78,000, $78,500, the budget was deflated by $78,500 and then increased by $78,500, literally because, not to have this sort of back and flow, but literally there were some things in that initial pass, like we didn't know the number on the food service POS system. It's still kind of at play. We're actually hoping on that to be able to have one site license and have that site license affect all 3 of our school districts to save money. We don't know that, and won't know that for another few days until we confer. So we're hoping to say, we're the public schools in Dover-Sherborn. We happen to have 3 cost centers. They happen to be these 3 school districts. That would therefore save us some money too on that, if we don't have to buy a site license times 3. So budget went down by 78.5, up by 78.5. We got a lot more stuff covered. We hopefully answered a lot of questions in a net zero sum game.
Any questions from up here? Did you guys understand the longevity?
Well,
Did it?
by the contract, we have to put in 10. We're
Right.
putting in 4.
We're putting in 4.
And
And that,
6 retire, we have to come up with.
right.
what-
And that these guys looked at, Steve talked to both town administrators as to whether there was an alternative vehicle to do it. And this seemed like the easiest, simplest, clear,
Yeah.
True.
as opposed to trying to,
What some of what I think it was Dover, but I think Dave Ramsey told me that at town meeting they can create through town meeting floor a vote to create a reserve account, and that would be at the town level, and that would hold money in that reserve account for exactly this type of thing, like unanticipated teacher retirements, just like potentially police officers sick time buyback, that kind of thing. That's what the towns have used a reserve for. I'm getting the nod from Jeff Merrill in the back. That's what Dover
Right.
does.
So then at the Springtown meeting, we'd have to make a request for
right.
additional funds and, yeah.
And yes,
It was complicated. It
But
seemed,
for us, we could, in a sense, if we have a baseline of E&D of 500,000,
right.
we could just, or whatever, say it's 20,000 now, whatever, we could just say, let's fund our E&D at 520,
Right.
knowing that if we used it,
Right.
it would have anyways a favorable impact to the next year's budget because we would be replacing those with most likely significantly less.
I think that's why they brought it down from 50 to 20 and thought that that was the right balance
Why not bring
between.
it down to 0 and simply fund by the time you.
No, you can't,
By the
because we
time
have
you
to,
know.
no.
Because
No.
We know
I
those
would-
not
There's
retirements.
no appetite to do that.
But I'd rather
Well,
just
there
say
is in
let's
some places.
cover it by an increase in the E&D.
Yes.
So it's not taking it to 0, it's in operationally. We could allocate more E&D to cover that one specific piece,
Well,
and then it would favorably.
But we don't have
I
to
would
decide that
suggest
right now.
we leave it where it is now, and then see how it works the first year. I mean, we've never
Well,
done this
it doesn't,
before.
it is where it is. I think what Michael's saying, that we could choose to say that our contribution from E&D, while usually is 500, is going to be 520 this year, is what he's saying. Is
See
more
how
where
the
the money's
numbers
coming
play out.
from,
Yeah,
as opposed
yeah,
to the money that's in
It's way
there.
too early to know what we're gonna do.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I have a problem with taking and I think it's not just my problem, it's advisory problem. They did not want to fund this at all.
Well,
There
But
was,
we're going
It's
to
in
have
the
teachers
contract.
retire.
there
It's in the
was,
contract,
there was
so we
a
have to figure out how
strong
to.
feeling, the strongest feeling I have experienced on that committee, not to fund that $50,000 at all. To say the budget is minus that whatever the final figure is, that it's minus that $50,000 because, first of all, it's highly unlikely. There's no requirement to fund it up front. The only requirement is that the award has to be paid when a teacher retires. That's the only requirement to the contract. There's no requirement to fund it up front. So
We have to budget
They
for that.
retire
they
at the end.
retire at the end of a school year,
Right.
and the money has to be paid. Now, one of the ways you can do it is to put money in a reserve fund for that purpose.
But
And-
that's what we were looking into. We couldn't
Well, you can't.
have that mechanism.
I hate to be simplistic, maybe where do we get the money other than
Right.
asking the towns for it?
And the town would vote to fund that, and as the article stands,
Is this
I'm-
but is this a conversation about the money in a Sherborn school
Well,
committee
it's-
budget
I mean,
or
it's
a
the
Dover
whole-
one? Because if it is, I don't think we need to be entertaining
Right,
that.
right.
It's our
It's also-
number.
it's also-
Our number, I would propose, if we're getting pushback, that we just adjust our E&D.
Well, I don't think we have to answer that question
Right,
today.
let's see where we
But
go.
what I don't get to is that in the original budget, I only added 40, and I couldn't figure out where the other 10 was.
It's in the, no, there's two lines. One's high school and one's 25.
21.2 and 19.9 was the increase. To me, that's
It's our
40,000.
responsibility as a budget.
Because the other stuff comes down.
It's our responsibility.
It's just
budget.
the-
Yeah, I
Right,
mean,
no,
to me,
get
this is
that.
all
I'm just saying
semantic. It's like if we're gonna pay
that's
it.
their town
It's like a shell
directly
game.
funded budget. I think ours operates on a different mechanism.
We're a separate legal entity.
Then you can handle it differently, but I'll tell you, there's going to be pushback from.
But Mary, if we know that there are going to be some number of teachers, let's pick a number.
Well, that's
Four.
the problem.
2. Let's just say it's 2. If we have pretty good probability that it'll be between 2 and 4, why would we ever fund 0? Because to fund 0 means we have a really good probability that it will be 0.
And then maybe have to come for supplemental like everybody else does.
But like,
But that means we have to go to,
so
that means we have to go to Dover and to Sherborn at town
What,
meeting.
it
for
seems like we should
supplemental
budget for our best
$10,000.
guess, just like we do with everything else.
And it's not an optional payout, it's a required payout.
It's a
so-
required payout,
So
but
why
there's
would
also,
we
there's
not
usually,
fund it?
you turn back 500,000 every
But,
year.
but Mary, on the flip
we use
side,
it.
Yeah,
we
and that's
also
1%.
try to forecast pregnancies, or when we know there's a pregnancy, we build that reduction into the budget when we know it. You
Right.
know?
Right.
So,
Well,
We're
if they don't
estimating
have to even
compensation
know
then.
that.
okay, I don't
I mean,
think
I
we
think
need to
that's
answer,
yeah.
I think the good thing, we have a lot of issues identified. We know what where they're coming from, which is good, and now we'll know as we move forward we'll figure out how best to navigate it to get what we need to. Yes, Jeff?
One very quick question, and I'm not posing this as a member of the warrant committee. I'm posing it as an individual who lives here. And given the lateness of the hour, I'm posing the question and letting you decide when you want to answer it.
Okay.
One of the things that's a bit concerning is, particularly in the last couple of budgets, you've got some non-recurring expenses. The one that's on page 1, which just leaps out, is the negotiation. And I understand the process behind it. However, that's a non-recurring item. So you go into this year knowing your budget's going to be down $200,000 because you're not going to need to do it. In addition, next year, as a result of the refinancing that is going to be done, you're going to have a reduction in interest expense of probably half of what's there. However, there is no compensation conceptually in the budget numbers for that accord. If you were to look at the 2015 budget without the negotiating expense, the increase this year wouldn't be 5.2, it would be 6.1. So I raised the question, when you have no non-recurring expenses,
That number, the negotiating number, it just changed places. That was what we budgeted in anticipation of the teacher's contract increases.
so it wasn't related to negotiations?
No, it wasn't.
No.
We did not
Okay,
pay,
then I stand corrected.
200,000 in legal costs.
But that would have been a
Oh,
fair
okay.
question had that been the case.
I
Yeah.
stand corrected,
Yeah.
but then in the same regard, if you look at the interest expense, and the way I understand your debt, you have a coupon right now of about 4.5%. And when you take a look at what you're probably going to refinance it at, it's going to be closer to 2%.
But again, that piece, that will reduce our budget.
Right.
And our assessment to each of the towns. But you guys are not going to end up with a favorable variance. It's going to come away from your tax line. Because it was debt that was excluded. And the minute you paid off that debt or that change in the cost of that debt, the taxing authority goes away. So the only person who sees...
But isn't that true in terms of the actual debt versus the actual expense?
And the interest, yeah.
It'll go down. It will definitely. We're asking.
I understand, but the question is, if I understand correctly, which I may not, as you take a look at the interest expense, it shows $407,000 for the 16 budget, and that's excluding any impact of a refinancing. If that number were to go down to 200,000. Now the question is, it's no longer a non-recurring expense, and any increase to the budget is going to take that savings and put it on top.
No,
that's not all of our
because again, the way that it goes back to the assessor's department, and when they calculate the tax rate, it's based upon your normal operating taxing authority that can go up 2.5%, and then they add in any excluded debt as it actually costs. And that cost is going to go down. The individual taxpayers will see that immediate impact, but that's not money for us to,
No,
that's
understand.
fungible, and
I
that's
need to
not
do some
money
more
for
work,
you guys to be
so I
fungible
apologize.
either. It's a favorable impact if you're looking at your town's tax rates, and that factors into your guys' guidance decisions or other presentations or budget
Understand.
issues.
Sorry to bother you.
Yeah.
No.
But that's,
I'm glad he was here to explain it. Okay. Whew. So, therefore, what we'd like now, any of you guys and/or the finance committees, is to digest all of that, make sure that all the questions, I think I was kind of going through and checking off against the questions that I received. I think we've covered everything, but we will be open again over the next month to more questions if they come up, hopefully at the same level of materiality. We're not going to try and go to lower levels of materiality, just we've answered all the big questions, but if other questions come up, and hopefully you guys can report back to your committees how this is progressing. And we'll keep working with the big issues. And we know we owe you everybody some information. Okay. Anything else? Huh. Okay. So what can we do now?
We have town report, goal focus.
Yes, did everyone get
What you need?
the fascinating piece of literary excellence that popped up in your... No, it was in your inbox at like 4 o'clock this afternoon. But it said things like
Make sure
this.
the numbers are right.
Yeah, well, Christine popped in
Okay,
the numbers actually, and there's just one more number of the donations that Cheryl is gonna pop in when she gets it. Feel free. Just make sure you keep in the line that says, "Now that Carolyn's on board."
Life is good. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn, for doing
I'm
that.
just teasing.
All right.
I'll be happy to do it as well.
Karen, would you like to talk about, international?
I would.
All right.
As the December 2014 regional school committee, you had asked for some additional information about the international students. So I provided this material for you. I'm going to do a high-level overview of some of the points here. That we will be accepting students should you decide to engage with their education through the ages of 15 to 18. Only potentially freshmen, sophomore, or juniors, because a lot of international students are looking for a diploma, which we will not offer. It's not something that I think is commensurate with an international student being for 3 years to receive a Dover-Sherborn diploma.
So we could have an 18-year-old come as a junior. They can.
They actually do a gap year sometimes. It's international students. They must maintain a C average, and please understand, we are at full disclosure to be able to place these students where we feel is appropriate. So they would never displace a DS student who needed a specialized course or anything like that. Mr. Smith and I would work closely with Ms. Shagnon and the incoming student to place them. And in my experience in my former district, we were able to do so. Recruitment happens through educations. There's a nifty little brochure, there's a print brochure that I'm going to pass to you so that you can see, but most of this is done online. So you can see what the profile looks like. Students are accepted on an F1 visa, which means they're here for 1 year, and they can only stay for 1 year and must go back. The application process is pretty rigorous. In the Google file that Mr. Bliss set up for international students, you can see a sample of that application process. And it does conduct an interview, because what we noticed through our discussions with Steve Jenkins from Education is these students are highly coached, because it is of they want to be able to be part of the American system. So they're highly coached, and sometimes they'll get answers from somebody in a chair that's out of reach. So we actually will do a Skype interview. We'll look at their English proficiency, we'll look at their transcripts, we'll look at references. They have to write an essay. There's all sorts of things in that application process you can see.
Karen, you see, the interviews are with DS personnel, not with education's personnel?
No, they are not. And we can ask educators to be with us, but I think the most important part is Mr. Smith.
Oh, I agree.
Ms. Shagnon, and maybe an educator,
So
I don't know.
how do you know there's no one in the room with them?
You don't, but there are ways to see.
Yes, and we'll just
Show
the
where you
camera.
are.
Do a video.
There probably will be someone in the room who has higher English
Oh, no, you can do it, and you only see me, and you don't see John.
It's more of the English comprehension. What are they going to do?
No, that's not what they're.
We'll figure it out. So that's how, and every application is reviewed by us, and we don't have to accept any of the applications that come forward. We can accept a few, we can do whatever we want, but we would partner with education to start to think about accepting international students. The host families are identified through numerous methods. Meet and greet, we'll host something at the high school, we'll do direct mailing. We get to decide what that looks like, because you've seen those little posters. Want to host an international student. That doesn't move. So we certainly wouldn't enjoy that. So please, whatever it is, we'll control that aspect, and we'll work closely with the high school. There's a home stay department through education that supports these families, and they receive a visit from the education coordinator representative. Having been through this process in my former district, it's pretty comprehensive. And they're really looking at these host families. They do receive a stipend of $700 per month. That comes out of the fee that the student pays education, separate from what we receive as tuition. The international coordinator is assigned to the school and works with each of those international students. And it was suggested by educationists and others that we designate a school-based employee to be a liaison for these people, for these students. And it's really akin to, much like the peer mentoring program for the freshmen. So we would look to recommend 3 ratio points for that person. And the cost of that would come out of the tuitions we would receive from education. So there's no impact to the budget. The proposed fee structure is you take what the DESE designates as our per pupil cost, and right now it is only posted through 2013. That happens to be $17,123. We would add the athletic fee of $275 and the activity fee of $45 for a total of $17,443. Well, let's round it to $17,500.
Are we not adding the liaison ratio, the 3 ratio?
No, because that would come out of the tuitions once they're received.
It's tough to do. We talked about that, Claire. It's a good question. It's tough to do because, we may, for like year one, we may know, because we may say, let's only accept X number of kids.
Right.
So we could take.
But we're putting up the cost per pupil to charge, right?
Correct. So we could.
So we could say,
You could say
in the first year
$18,000,
it's $500 a person.
Yeah.
Right.
And add $500 to that.
Could probably make sense.
And it has,
I personally don't feel we should be out of pocket for any of this.
Right.
No.
it is, it's the tuition that we receive that we're paying for. It's not, I see both sides of it, so it's that whatever you wish. We get to decide what tuition we would like to charge. That's just a recommendation, as I spoke to Mr. Bliss and consulted with Mr. Smith about what's ballpark. A lot of districts are between 14 and 17. So that's something to keep in mind.
My question is, it sounded like we already have problems getting host families for the program we do have. Are there actually going to be people to host these kids if we accept them? What do we do? Do we get the host families in place before we accept the kids? Because I would hate to accept the kids and then be spending a lot of time scrambling around trying to find host families.
It isn't we who find those host families, it is education.
But even so, I would hate to enter into an agreement with them if we don't think we can find families.
In my experience in Native, we didn't think we would be able to either. We hosted an informational session. I had 25 families come. to say, well, I'd like to do that.
But did they already have, like, did Natick already have an AFS exchange? Because we already have a foreign exchange that we have part-time filling host families for. So it's not like this would be a new thing for Dover. Whereas for Natick, if it was a totally new program, I could see thinking you wouldn't get families and then finding them. But we already know we have a hard time getting families for the program we have.
I don't think we'll know until we try.
Right.
I guess what
and that
Carol's
was my
is
initial
what's the
reaction.
timing? Do we have to commit to a student before we know we've been able to find? Can both of those processes be moving in parallel, such that if we really did come to a hard stop on the hosts, we'd have enough time to gracefully get out of the process of bringing a student on board, so that we weren't doing that student a disservice, where he or she could go someplace else.
I cannot issue and I'm the designated official, I cannot issue an F1 visa without a placement for residents here.
Right, but we could, I think what Danny's saying is we could accept a student and say, great, we really want you, and that student's excited about coming here, and we can't find, or say it's 4 students.
Right.
4 students, and we can only find housing for 2, and it's, I don't know, May, and,
And now those
we're
students
Why
to
don't
go
we just
away.
plunge forward and learn? I guess I'm not
Well,
sure why we're just speculating.
Right, but then
But it's educated speculation based on a program we already have. It's not idle
There
speculation.
may be, the difference, I think, between this experience and the AFS experience, I think, is going to partly depend on the $700 a month, which isn't a trivial amount of money.
So the host family gets that?
Host family
Yes, they
gets
do.
$700.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yes.
Okay, so what's going to happen to our AFS program then? I mean, are we now killing our AFS program?
The AFS program.
But I have
So,
had conversations with Beth Benjamin a year ago, and she's been having difficulty navigating getting host families prior to us even looking at it.
Right.
no, I get that, but I'm saying, are we comfortable with basically probably killing our AFS program if we do this?
We had that conversation, she's going to forge forward. I can't speak to what will happen next.
I think in the end, the goal will be to have diverse international students here in whatever way it works.
Because I'm not that familiar with AFS, fundamentally, how is it a different program
The hosts don't get paid.
than this?
That's pretty much it.
Does the school get paid?
No.
No.
Okay. But the students we attract are not any different potentially than what this program could attract, or is it skewed
They
globally?
may
Or
not pay as much, right?
So
We
the one
will be
thing-
attracting
yeah,
With this
students
program,
whose
we may,
parents can pay
we may
to send
see
them overseas.
a more affluent
So
family.
it might skew to only attracting affluent families globally, whereas AFS might have
A more
Yeah.
possibly,
Correct.
because there's still substantial expenses associated with sending your child away
Yes.
for a year.
Yes.
Okay.
I think it's important to note that the school certainly would continue to support any AFS
Oh, yeah.
program that would come here. If it's the will of the community to continue it, great. But that's not a problem we get to solve for the community if they're not willing to do so. This program makes sense for this school community. I really don't think we're going to kill AFS. If AFS has the ability to continue on, they can do so.
But if we only have 4 families thinking they'll host, and one person's being offered $700, or you're getting nothing.
Yeah. Well, that's capitalism. I mean,
No, but to Michael's point, if you're attracting a different kind of kid, maybe that is a value to the system.
Possibly.
I don't know that, but I'm just saying it's not just let's let the market decide. It's also a question of is there a different kind of, and I'm not saying that we prefer AFS over this, but we should recognize that there might be a different kid who's coming through AFS than is
But we
coming through
won't know
this.
until we try this and then do an effective evaluation 1 or 2 years later and say, is it a different population than what we've had with AFS? Otherwise,
So-
it's just speculation.
Karen, the plan is to try it for a half year? Is that
I
right
would
at first?
recommend a semester approach. So to contract with Educations, to be put into their publication, and we would accept students for the spring of 2016. 16. It's too many budget years going on here.
Yep.
The spring of 2016.
And Let's go ahead.
Sorry, could we say we'd only take 2 or
Right.
3 or at least?
Right, and could
Specify
we,
the grade level.
right, I was gonna say, would we target, say, 11th grade, because that's
Yeah.
the smallest, what would be the smallest
Yeah, we
grade?
would definitely look at that, and I think to start off with, it would also make sense to probably have a little bit of an older student from a maturity standpoint, especially we're trying a new program,
Yes.
as opposed to, student entering ninth grade.
Yeah, having sent one, I agree with that.
I actually spoke to Steve Jenkins
Yeah.
from Education Student Response.
Oh, we
He said, if we target a grade level, it may be difficult for us to get those 2 students. So we might want to think sophomore or junior.
10 and 11.
10 and 11.
So
that
say
you may
10
get-
and 11, but
you may get 2
you may
juniors
only
for all we
pick
know.
2 juniors.
Right.
You could, you could.
To me, while they might be more mature, they're also going to be meeting people who are new drivers. Or sophomores are still pretty much
On
dependent
their
on
learner's permit.
Not just,
All right,
so
is any other information that
We need a
we need a vote?
go on this.
But do we need to agree what we're going to charge tonight?
I think to be able to go into the publication and get the application running. we need
So-
application.
Is the
So
tuition
what
in there?
exactly is that number?
It probably makes sense, Claire, to land at 18,000 because that
It's gotta be
17,500.
over, yeah. Because
Yeah.
17,123, 275 for one sport.
That's one sport. What if
And they probably do
play
it
two
two sports. 45 activity fee and
Some contribution
towards the ratio.
Well, the 18 would be for the year, so, but you don't really want to just cut it in half because the activity fee and the sports fee doesn't get cut in half, so
Right, so-
you kind of want 10 if you're going to do semester.
Yeah, because you'd only be in one sport if you're in
I guess
in
that's
one
true.
Why do
semester.
we need this number tonight? It's not in this publication.
yeah, it's not in
that's
the publication.
But probably to start the process.
To start the process of the memorandums of expectations with education, I need to put in the tuition for the school year is, and semester students will be. So we can
All right,
propose
so
some models and
171,
maybe get some feedback. 75, I think, to be perfectly honest, when you get to the 18,000, I'm not so sure you're going to attract a lot of students because that increases
So-
their amount that they have to pay.
18.2 is our tuition, 2 sports, an activity fee, and a $500 contribution towards the ratio.
But if you don't do the $500 towards your contribution, you come in under 18. Because the whole, in theory, all of this money goes towards the ratio because there's no variable cost of a student in the building.
Right.
Other than the
So that's
the
17.
activity fee and the athletics.
78.
I think this is actually going to cost. I mean, actual cost per pupil.
For an international, for us?
For us.
Yes.
No, but there is no
I
variable
mean,
cost.
I think it's far less than
It is.
Oh, I see.
right?
There's no
I mean,
variable
it's
We wouldn't
gonna
incur
be-
the cost, we wouldn't incur 70,000.
No, no, it's,
No.
Right, I mean,
Because the life world is a step function here.
You just,
$4 grand.
you never know what
The tipping point.
student is a tipping point for anything, whether it's a development going in off of Whitney Drive or
Right.
this.
So 17,725 covers everything less the ratio.
Right.
2 sports and an activity fee.
Let's just make it 18.
Just make it 18.
Well, unless there's some marketing barrier with,
I think you would
The
think
market.
18,000 count if I was a ceiling. I mean, I don't think there's anyone in the market who,
I don't even know, I'd have to
Yeah.
speak to Mr. Jenkins to see if there's anyone in at that level.
Yeah.
So you're saying
I mean,
that
that's what it costs to
17,000
go to
was
school.
the ceiling?
Yeah.
What's the actual
14
ceiling?
and 17 is usually.
So 17,000 is our.
But I mean,
market.
I don't feel like we should be discounting
It's
to
just
get
the
people to
waters.
come here. We already have a
Right,
program.
we're not
So-
looking to fill more seats.
We're not looking to fill more seats. I don't
If
think.
really we're looking
but we're looking
for
to
foreign
enrich the
students,
student
then
body.
let's help our AFS program. That's
But that
not-
we get nothing for it, so that makes no sense.
And AFS
This
is really
this is
backbencher.
much more
She's done-
incremental over
she's
AFS.
Done a great job.
Yeah, she has. She's done a great job.
I think this is trying to,
Yeah, I think this is filling the gap for.
17,700. Once,
going once, going twice.
17,000.
that's what it costs.
do we hear a motion?
All right. Well, we're doing a semester first anyway, so can we just set a semester cost and?
See how it works?
Well,
No,
they
you set the
advertise
year
us
and
for the
then-
full year, but we will only accept semester students is what all that education.
So why don't, for the
So I
first
will
year,
make
we
a
say
motion.
17.5 with a $9,000 or whatever semester cost,
Yep.
and then in year 2, since we aren't accepting any full year students this year, we could always go up. Done.
Moved.
That's it. Oh, we've got to cover.
But we are covering costs.
All right.
There's no actual variable cost.
I know.
There are so many more programs we have that don't cover their costs.
Yeah.
All right, so,
Moved.
all right, so I'll make a motion for 17.5 with a semester of,
Well, you do half the 17,122 and add the sport and the.
right,
No, I'm
exactly.
good with just saying 9.
I was just gonna say
Well,
9,
no,
yeah.
just 35 and a half.
9. 17.5 and 9. That's the motion on the table. Do I have a second?
For how many
Second.
students?
For up to
3?
3?
So I prefer just your recommendation.
I don't know, what do you think?
I'd say 3.
Three.
No,
Okay?
And you don't have to take.
No?
we do not have to take.
For grades 10 and 11.
10 and 11 only.
Okay, that's the motion.
I second.
Second. Okay, any more discussion? No? All those in favor? Are you
Reluctant.
Yes, are you reluctant? Okay.
Very reluctant.
Thank you, Karen, and John, and Scott.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Okay.
We started the discussion.
Do you want to do the 2 7 on the minute mail?
Yes.
So people know what's being discussed.
That would be great if you could do that.
Ah, okay.
That's why we're here.
Sorry. I was wondering what you were waiting around
That's
for.
fine, that's it.
Okay.
So last year,
Guys, this is actually, I don't know if
on
you
the,
would.
on the Minuteman conversation, last year, Minuteman Voc Tech High School seeks to do a major building campaign, and as a result of that, whatever the cost of any kind of campaign would be, or building initiative would be assessed back to member districts. This actually is not an issue that resides with the Dover-Sherborn Regional School Committee. It actually resides with Dover School Committee. But because it touches high school kids, obviously we thought it important to bring it up. So last year, Minuteman, the leadership at Minuteman, and one of the biggest champions of it being Floyd Spalding from Dover, who's on their school committee, they wanted all member districts to bring to their town meetings approval for this huge building project. And at the time, the Dover Board of Selectmen said, we need more information around this. We need to know, like, what are we actually bringing to town meeting for? And as I understand it from Karen, Mrs. Lisbon, Dover Board of Selectmen did not get the information last year they really needed. There wasn't anything really solidified to bring to the town meeting floor. So it kind of evaporated off of town meeting floor for 14. So it will be brought back, but in the interim, there are a number of districts belonging to Minuteman that are not so enamored of the idea of contributing to this massive building project because many districts just do not send enough students. Dover happens to be one. So we looked at the data since 2008 and 9. We've had 1 or 2. We haven't even gotten to 3 students in any given year at Minuteman. So I compiled all that information and provided it to Robin Hunter, who was sort of doing a lot of the homework around this, because they were meeting tonight, Dover Board of Selectmen, and Don Fattori was going to attend. And essentially, what has been drafted, you'll love it, is an IMA between Minuteman and the town of Dover, because essentially, I believe tonight, Dover Board of Selectmen will probably pull out of the arrangement formally with Minuteman and enter into an IMA arrangement that says, if a child from Dover wants to go there, there'll be a tuition cost plus what they're calling a facility use fee, facility cost, and that will now be the operational construct for a high school age student from Dover seeking a vocational, educational, technical vocational experience. So, because for the 1 or 2 kids from Dover that go to Minuteman, it would have been a multi-million-dollar potentially assessment to the town of Dover to contribute to this huge building campaign. It just didn't make financial sense for the town of Dover. So over the past few days, we compiled a lot of the enrollment data for Robin, Carol, and for Mr. Dolly. And tonight they were taking it up as an issue, but I do believe that the thinking on it, the best thinking on it, I saw drafts of the IMA agreement, and there was inclination to, I think at that point, to move in the direction of, we will just, when a student wants to go from Dover, we'll pay the tuition and we'll pay this facility use cost. As of 48 hours ago, I hadn't seen an IMA with that facility cost embedded in it. So I certainly hope that the leadership from Minuteman provided that to the Dover Board of Selectmen tonight, because I don't know how they could take action without knowing what they were really paying for, or paying, period. But I do, and I can't probably, I assume we've already, in the last few hours, probably withdrawn from the arrangement with Minuteman, and probably the Board of Selectmen are looking at that IMA, even as we speak.
And it's probably questioning whether they're going to be able to go forward with the building project as the numbers drop out.
The interesting part of that, though, is that when you do a building project and you belong to something, you actually have to have unanimous vote from your member towns.
Yeah.
So they were conflicted about, wow, if we go before these towns, they aren't really going to be behind it. We're not going to get the vote to do the project. And if they pull out the assessment to their remaining member towns.
But there were other towns that wanted to come in. Yeah. It was my.
Yeah, but there's a.
But the annual cost of the schools is extraordinary.
To which schools?
To any of the tech schools, because you see a tiny little footnote in the Sherborn town budget every year. I mean, it's 20 plus 25,000.
Yeah.
Speaking of incremental cost and whether our tuition is going to cover international.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Pavoni?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Okay.
Okay.
Consent agenda.
My consent.
Only an hour and 45 minutes behind schedule. Okay. The regional school committee meeting minutes of December 2nd.
Can we hold this arbitrator?
School committee selection of arbitrator, hold obsolescence declaration fitness equipment, donation acceptance loiters environmental, donation acceptance winter coaching stipend for basketball, donation acceptance DS youth basketball donation, and a donation acceptance of anonymous.
I'm going to ask what are we going to use it for?
Oh, what's the money going to be used for?
Anonymous?
Yes.
I emailed the parents the other day and asked if they have specification on that. This is a family that gives to us every year, and it has typically been for special education.
Right, we did it last year.
We did it last year.
Okay. All right. You had a specific question on the school committee arbitrator?
I just want
Have it in English what that meant?
So essentially, here's MGL Chapter 150, Section E.
So basically, the arbitration information only goes back to the school committee it's used with, and there's no one that collects all of the school committees.
If we had agreements,
Arbitrating
there was no,
reports.
it basically allows this body to use MASC as a first line of defense in an unsolvable grievance. So you could enlist MASC as your arbitrator by taking this action, as I read it.
I read it, I thought it was, well, that, but also, any of the findings in arbitration aren't collected. Where did I read that? They go back to each district that's in arbitration, and there's no one place, like MTA collects all their arbitration findings.
Yeah.
And so when next time they go out, they go, oh, well, we have this over here and that over there. As school committees, we don't have the opportunity to have that information as handily.
If you were to use MASC, you're saying?
If we used MASC, we would, because everyone would be giving that information to MASC.
So doesn't this act favorably then
Yes, I'm not saying it doesn't.
Oh,
I'm not saying it
okay,
doesn't. That's what I understood it to mean.
MASC is saying it's to our advantage to do this because then we get to draw on the wealth of other decisions that any other party has.
Which to me was a good thing. The only question is, are MASC the right arbitrators? I have no idea.
I don't think this means that you exclusively would have to use them. You have the option to. And what MASC realized is, well, they should really grow because they provide this to school committees. And their suggestion was that school committees consider using them. They may not be ultimately whom you choose to work with.
So why do we have to name them now?
I mean, you don't have to. Dover School Committee, Sherborn School Committee felt like there was no harm in doing so, and it was probably better to get it on the record.
Yeah, right, that's what my confusion was. It sounded like it was, the biggest thing anyone was gonna get out of it is all the decisions were gonna come into one place. And when we go against, in this instance, the teachers union, you know, someone would have access to all that case records.
Is this arbitration for contracts or arbitration for individual grievances?
Grievances.
Okay.
And do we ever do this?
So we haven't had to.
Should we propose a motion on that one? And
Oh, it's in the consent agenda, so the motion is to accept what's written there.
Come forward.
I'm fine with it. So if you want to take a separate motion on it, we can.
Or I'll just abstain, because I don't really know enough.
So you want,
For
you
what's
want
the
to
motivation
abstain,
on
you
their
should.
hat behind it.
Let's take it out.
Okay, let's take it out of the consent agenda. So let's vote on the consent agenda. Do I have a motion for the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second. Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, consent agenda. And then on this particular one, the selection of arbitrator. The motion is on the table because it was on there. Michael will second it. Any more discussion on it? You guys ready to take a vote? All right, so let's take a vote. All those in favor? Aye, so,
I'm abstaining.
and Claire's abstaining. So 501. Okay.
Wicked.
There's many things for your review. And then we do have to have a short executive session. So I need to poll for executive session. Michael?
yes.
Lori? Sure. Richard?
That means I
Claire?
gotta pay attention.
Carolyn? Yes, okay, we're in executive session. Thank you for having